All right, welcome back for our afternoon session. We've got to finish up on on our electric utilities education session, and then we'll have one more topic to close out the day that's certificated service territories of electric utilities. But let's get back to our general electric utilities, and we have next on our agenda Rocky Mountain Power. Where's Mr. Cason? There he is. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Rick Cason. I appear before you on behalf of Rocky Mountain Power. The purpose of being with you this afternoon is I did talk with both of your chairmen in an effort to try to meet the expectations of what the committee was hoping for with respect to Rocky Mountain Power's rate cases. And again, they said, please hit the highlights of the rate cases. They recognize that these are, as you heard earlier today, open dockets in front of the Public Service Commission. And what that means is we can't go into a lot of detail. Mr. Chairman, if I may, some of the information I'm going to share is going to be a little bit repetitive, so I ask for your indulgence, but I'll try to get through that as quickly as possible and try to maintain your schedule. My intent this afternoon is to share with you, again, information on the two rate case filings in front of the Public Service Commission. First, I'll address the general rate case, and then I will follow that up with the discussion on the energy cost adjustment. And I don't know if your preference is to stop after the general rate case and try to answer questions, or go through both rate cases and then address questions, whatever your prerogative might be.
Yeah, let's see it. Let's see where we're at, and just if the committee, I'd rather just get through both before we open it up to questions if we can.
And of course, if there's a very urgent question on a topic, we're always flexible enough to try to answer it at that time, if that's acceptable.
Yep, I think that's good.
Okay, very good. All right, let's start then. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Public Service Commission for their presentation this morning. I think it was very, again, in the theme of education, it was very, very beneficial. And I'm going to refer back to that document towards some of my closing comments. But let's take a look at the general rate case first, sir. This is used to set base rates, and base rates is one of the components in rate making where the customers are charged for the services rendered by a utility. The general rate case was filed on March the 1st of this year with the proposed effective dates of January 1st of 2024. The increase is requesting $140.2 million, and overall that's an increase of 21.6%. You have heard, and you'll probably hear again as we move forward through the proceedings of this rate case, is the percentages differ between the rate classes of customers: residential, commercial, and industrial. And that again is based on what you heard earlier this morning on what it costs to provide that service to that classification of customer. That's why there is a difference in the percentages, and it's just not a 1% across the board for all customers. For example, the typical residential customer, should these rates be approved in their entirety, they would see a $16.20% increase, or $16.20 amount, and that equates to 20.3% for that typical customer, residential customer. Our typical residential customer is defined as a consumer that uses 702 kilowatt hours on a monthly basis, and that is just built from all of the customers in that residential classification, the total number of customers by the usage to come up with that. It is just one way to measure that, if I may. Approximately 97%, or $136 million, 97%, $136 million is to recover costs that have already been expended through what is referred to as the net power costs. And if I step back and refer to this as NPC, please correct me. It's net power costs. Net power costs is the cost or the expenses the company makes on behalf of its customers to provide that electric generation to the customers, whether it's from their own generation assets, its purchases on the wholesale market, purchase power contracts, transportation and transmission costs. So that is what a net power cost is. Net power costs, and this is going to perhaps get a little bit confusing, so I beg your indulgence. There's a component of the base rates that includes the net power costs. And then when we talk about the electric cost adjustment rate case, that is also part of the net power costs. So again, they're similar, but they're different in the different rate structures that Rocky Mountain Power has. Excuse me. The actual net power costs or expenses have risen 42% since 2021. As you heard earlier today, 2020 was the last rate case that Rocky Mountain Power, general rate case that the company had in front of the commission. And that is when the portion of the base rates with respect to the net power costs were established. So again, those actual net power costs have increased 42% since that last rate case. Natural gas prices, with regards to what are the drivers behind the request for this increase, natural gas prices have risen 89% since 2021, that same period of time. And that's as measured at the Opal gas hub, which is in southwestern Wyoming. The open market costs for electricity, and this is rather staggering, in my opinion, they've increased 199% since that 2021 period of time. And that's measured at the Palo Verde trading hub, which is located in the state of Arizona. And if you're not familiar with, there are various hubs for both natural gas and electric across the nation where prices are computed and for utilities to be purchasing electricity, natural gas, or what have you. The other part, another major driver in this, which we have all experienced, which our customers are experienced, which we have heard many times are experienced, that's inflation. And inflation is a big part of this rate case as well. And again, I think we all know what that's doing. As I mentioned, the net power cost was established in the last rate case. And based on these percentage increases, you can see that at that point in time, 3+ years ago, it was underestimated what those costs would be. Thus, these higher percentage increases that we are seeking. We've also heard discussion over the last several months, last several years about the renewables that Rocky Mountain Power is investing in, principally wind. But the renewables or sometimes it's called zero cost emissions in this day and age, the cost of those generation resources and the production, when we weigh in the tax credits that we have also been able to utilize on benefit for our customers, that has reduced our overall system costs. Overall system costs, and I'm referring to the entire 6 states in which our corporation serves. And I'll go back to the multi-state protocol in a little bit, if you'll bear with me. But those costs have computed to $625 million system-wide. Well, that's system-wide. What does that mean for us folks here in Wyoming? If we use the 15% allocation, which you heard earlier today, the historic 15% allocation that Wyoming utilizes, that's roughly a little less than $94 million that we have been able to realize in savings when we consider the renewable resources that we're putting into our generation fleet. The Western Energy Imbalance Market, this is another mechanism where electric utilities can purchase electricity. Again, it's kind of like, it's similar to a hub, but we can make those purchases at that time. These are kind of like on-the-market purchases to fill our demand needs. We've provided roughly $86 million to Wyoming since its inception in 2014. So again, we do see rate increase requests. But at the same time, the company is working to keep those costs as low as we possibly can by looking at all those possible resources that we can to generate the power to get that safe and reliable energy to our customers. The 2023 general rate case is a contested rate case. You heard earlier today that there are interveners in rate cases. And when you do have interveners, that becomes what is known as a contested rate case. And again, it's much like a court hearing that the great Madam Chairwoman said earlier about, or with the Public Service Commission. And so a contested rate case, they're very common with the Public Service Commission. And this is an opportunity for the company, a utility, to present its case, why it is asking for an increase with the supporting evidence and what have you, so that it can show that the request, and again, this is a little repetition, but I think it's very important that the costs that we have already experienced and will experience are prudent, reasonable, and are on behalf of our customers. As or perhaps more important, this is also an opportunity when it's a contested case for our customers to have their voices heard. And we have heard those voices quite a bit over the last several months. We heard them again last evening, and we respect those comments and we listen to those comments as well. And I think it's very important for those comments to be made by our customers so that we can hear them, as I said, so the commission can also hear those. And those customers can participate in the rate case either as individuals. They can work with commission staff to have their concerns looked at, and they can also work through the Office of Consumer Advocate. So there are entities that again are in support of our customers to have their voices heard, because it is a very complex, a rate case is very complex. It is time consuming, and to some degrees it is brain numbing. Excuse me for saying it that way, but that's the details that a rate case must go through. And so for our citizens, for our customers, again, they do have help out there to have their voices heard. The filed rate case represents the expenses that Rocky Mountain Power has made and again will make on behalf of its customers, again, to get that power to them in that safe and a reliable fashion. We have had the opportunity to recover its costs through this rate making process. And again, this 2023 rate case represents those costs. And again, that's in the detail of the filings, and that'll be part of the proceedings in front of the Public Service Commission over the next several months. And again, following that flow chart that the commission provided until a decision is rendered on these. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will then switch gears and we'll talk about the energy cost adjustment, unless there are any specific questions at this time.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, frankly, I heard what you said on the renewables and the effect on that and the capital costs, and I didn't understand it. You mentioned a 625 million system-wide going to 94 million that's relevant to Wyoming. Is that a capital cost? Is that an operating cost? Is that there was some savings involved? Mr. Chairman, I'm simply confused.
Mr. Kaysen.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, thank you for the opportunity to try to clarify that. Again, those costs are savings from the purchases or the generation of electricity that our customers have benefited from. So to use your term, maybe you consider it's an operating cost, but it's the commodity prices that we've been able to bring those prices down for both again, that 625 million or roughly the $94 million for customers. So it's related more to the generation resources that we utilize.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I frankly don't understand. It sounds like you're expending money, but this isn't the expense of the money. This is a piece of the puzzle that relates to the savings from not having to use natural gas and that sort of thing, coal. Is that what you're claiming?
Mr. Kason.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I could perhaps use a simple equation. If we were to, if the price to purchase X commodity, be it natural gas, be it coal, wind, whatever that resource might be, and let's say it's it would be $1.50. By going through some of the efforts that we have in purchasing at the hubs, and again, back to the Western Energy Imbalance Market, we were able to capture those prices at $1 compared to the $1.50 that was being the market price type of thing. So that 50 cents then is a savings to our customers. If we did not have those savings, that additional 50 cents would then be added to the total amount of the request that we are asking. So, sir, in an effort, it is those practices to purchase at the lowest possible cost we have or we can get is what is realized in those savings.
Senator Scott.
Chairman, it sounds like one of these too good to be true promotions you have on the TV. There's a cost in there somewhere because you have this 21% rate increase proposal. There's something that's driving that's beyond, because we haven't had that kind of escalation in the cost of generating power. It's actually going down right now, apparently. So I am totally confused by this.
Representative Wiley.
Mr. Kasem, so just to clarify, are you telling me megawatt for megawatt renewables are cheaper than coal-fired power?
Mr. Kason.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wiley, no, sir. It depends on the price at that moment in time or what the purchase power contract might be or what it may cost to generate that kilowatt hour of wind compared to another resource.
Follow up, please.
Representative Wiley.
So just in general terms, for the folks at home and everything, which is more affordable to purchase, coal powered generation or renewables?
Mr. Kason.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, again, there is no black and white answer to your question, which is a direct question, I understand. Again, it's a purchase in time, or it could be based on what a purchase power contract is, or the cost of that resource, be it natural gas, coal, or another resource to do. So again, I would like to be able to say X is less expensive or more expensive, but it is not that simple.
Yeah, Representative Wiley.
Mr. Kasem, okay, let's look at it this way. Which is more affordable, baseload energy or something that comes and goes, such as wind?
Mr. Kason.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wiley, I don't want to seem like I'm being evasive, but there is not a definitive answer with respect to all of the time, which may be less expensive, more expensive. Depends on where the resource is coming from. You also have to include, as I said earlier, what your transmission costs might be, but your question is directed to generation. But again, point in time, location, price of commodity, contracts, purchasing on the wholesale market on daytime purchases.
Thank you.
Senator Boner.
And I might direct the committee's attention to say there's open source examples of, say, the price of wind power and how that has gone down quite a bit in the past 10 years. As the original tax credits were scheduled to expire, magically when that was about to happen in December of 2020, you saw a rather significant drop in wind power. I think Mr. Kason is correct. It's not as simple as saying, okay, what's the dollar value per megawatt hour for wind versus natural gas versus coal, because it is going to vary significantly based upon the situation. But I think to answer the question directly is, well, yes, if you look at that Department of Energy report, when the wind is blowing, of course, it's intermittent, and that's another significant variable. It is quite a bit less expensive than even natural gas. But like I said, I think Mr. Kason is correct in pointing out that it really depends on the situation. Those are generic averages that may or may not apply to one particular utility or another. Now, that being said, I'm not necessarily supporting the Rocky Mountain Power's assertion that, that this is going to be a net savings. But I do have a question, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, about what we heard.
Yep, I was waiting for that.
Sorry, yeah, so I thought I'd just direct the, committee's attention. There is information out there that helps answer Representative Wiley's question, since he wasn't frankly getting an answer. So we just heard about the pass-on mechanisms with the Public Service Commission, which are supposed to adjust for commodity prices, right? And I'm just wondering how that interacts with Rocky Mountain Power's claim that a lot of this rate increase is based off of commodity prices, when we already have a mechanism to adjust automatically for, say, increases in natural gas or coal or whatever the base load commodity may be. So how can both of those be true? You have a mechanism in place to address that, but then you are also asking for this rate increase, which also claims, the increase in those commodities. How are those both true?
Mr. Kason.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner, if I may, perhaps that's a segue into getting into the second rate case that the company has in place, and will perhaps help answer the question, if I may.
Okay.
Or I could take that question on whichever way.
No,
you'd
go
like
ahead
to
and
go.
proceed with your
Okay.
presentation then.
All right. The energy cost adjustment filing, as you heard earlier today, sometimes referred to as a pass through or a pass on to customers. And that's a very important distinction, is a pass through versus the base rate, which I'll come back to in a little bit. That rate case was filed on April the 17th. It requested that the rates go into effect on July the 1st of 2023. And that would, of course, was subject to Public Service Commission review and a final approval or a final order by the commission. That increase requested $50.5 million or 7.6% increase. The commission did approve the rates to go into effect on July the 1st, and that was subject to, again, more review, subject to modification, and also waiting for a final decision. So those rates have been in effect for about a month and a half right now. The effect, again, just for illustration, for a residential customer, 5.1% or $3.53 per month, again, based on that typical residential customer that I identified earlier. Similarly to the general rate case, the drivers behind this, again, are wholesale power costs, coal prices, natural gas prices that will have been that the company has paid for the last 12 months. And that is one of the distinctions between a base rate part of the commodity costs and the pass-through. As I mentioned earlier, a component within the base rates does include the net power costs. The distinction for the energy cost adjustment is that it is more timely. As you heard, they're filed on a more frequent basis. They're filed on an annual basis for Rocky Mountain Power to either request an increase or a decrease. And that is an effort to keep a balance in there, if I may, to be as current as we possibly can and more timely with regards to recovery for the company or a refund to the customers through reduced prices. So Senator Boner, hopefully the distinction is there. There is a component in base rates, again, for the net power costs. The differentiation is that goes into base rates, and that cannot be acted upon or changed until the next rate case. And as I mentioned earlier, the last rate case, which was in 2020 and went into effect in 2021, the net power cost was part of that base rate component. Those subsequent years, the company also filed energy cost adjustment filings on the annual basis for the timeliness in the recovery. Very similar, but again, the pass-through is not part of the base rates. It's at one time. And again, a good distinction here is The pass-throughs, the company does not make a profit on, and you heard that earlier from the commission as well. It's a dollar for dollar recovery or a dollar for dollar return to the customers.
Senator Landon and then Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cason, my apologies. I want to go back to the first, the general case that you outlined earlier. I was unable to get it written down fast enough, but can you provide for us later, online or whatever, via email would be fine if those items that you listed, that are the cost drivers behind this rate increase. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Senator,
Or Mr. Casey.
okay. So if I may, just the principal drivers, and that's what I was hitting on. But I can follow through with the detail, everything, as much as I can, recognizing this is a contested case as well. But the principal drivers, again, are the actual net power costs have risen 42% since 2021. The natural gas prices have risen 89% since 2021. And again, that's measured at the Opal trading hub here in Southwest Wyoming. The open market costs have increased 199% since 2020, as measured at the trading hub at Palo Verde in the state of Arizona. I also threw inflation in there as part of the driver. And the one thing that I did miss, and thank you for this question because it gives me an opportunity to bring this in as well, is excuse me, coal production. It's on the increase in Wyoming. That's great. That's great for Wyoming. There's no doubt about that. However, there's also a corresponding power increase that we have forecasted into this rate case. And that for the 2024 forecast, that shows an increase of 38% for the purchase of coal. So coal, natural gas, purchasing the commodity, the different commodities, wind, coal, natural gas fired power from purchase power contracts, the open market. Those are the principal drivers, but I will follow up with more detail on all of the cost drivers.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I'm still trying to figure out.
He doesn't have his mic.
Oh, you gotta push that little button on the mic. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, trying to figure out the renewables yet. I guess first question for Mr. Cason is in your base of the capital that you've got, how much total is that you spent on renewables? What does that amount to a year, and how does that translate to Wyoming?
Mr. Cason.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, if I may, is that related to your question earlier today about the value assets in Wyoming of transmission, generation, and the distribution
It's-
system?
Senator
Yes
Scott.
and no, but I'm trying to figure out. You were talking about the savings that you're generating from this. I'm trying to figure out what the capital cost implications to get those were. And I know you, and am I right in understanding that some of the renewables, Rocky Mountain Power has owns and operates, and some of them you're buying from other people's, are you not?
Mr. Cason.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir.
And so what's the part that's come into the rates from what you're buying, and what's the part that's come into the rates as a return on the renewables that you own?
Mr. Cason.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I do not have that data in front of me or with me. That will be a follow-up to Senator Scott's question if permissible.
Okay, that's fine. Representative Newsom.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kasem, so I'm assuming that given the volume of power that you use, that you have future contracts that you contract for coal, natural gas, power into the future. I don't know if that's correct.
Mr. Kason.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Newsom, yes, there is, you purchase contracts into the future. Again, you negotiate the very possible best cost you can on behalf of the customer. So, yes, it is in a manner of speaking, it's future, some are future-driven contracts.
And just to follow up,
Go ahead.
what of coal, natural gas, and renewable energy do you find to be the most volatile? Do you find to be the one that you have to forecast out a little more aggressively, I guess?
Mr.
Thank
Kason.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Newsom, this is going to be another follow-up question, if I may, instead of just kind of off the top of my head. But again, based on some personal experience, I think the volatility as we look at the commodity prices and the fluctuations, kind of a roller coaster experience, would probably be leaning towards the natural gas commodity. Again, that's my experience, but I'm going to follow up with more definitive data on that.
Just one more.
Go ahead.
And more of a comment, I guess in our last meeting, we were told that at one point, natural gas was around $2.50. And then within a very short amount of time, it went up to $8, over $8. And that commodity pricing was problematic for you as a provider and for us as a consumer. And so I guess I would tend to think that natural gas is a pretty volatile commodity, and then that there seems to be a trend in the in energy industry to move coal-fired power plants to natural gas as a resource. And I wonder how that affects the pricing that we'll see, the volatility of the pricing, I guess, that you'll see as a provider and we'll see as consumers.
Mr. Kason.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Newsom, thank you for that additional discussion. Yes, I thought when we saw the volatility or natural gas prices increasing, again, there are some of the causes of that. Again, supply and demand. We unfortunately are still experiencing a conflict between the two countries a long way from us, and that has caused some prices of natural gas. Weather conditions, even though some folks have stated, well, we should practice and be ready for severe weather conditions. We do. In Wyoming, I think we're doggone smart about practicing and preparing for weather conditions. But when a weather condition takes place 1,000 miles away from here, and remember, natural gas can be transported pretty easily in pipelines. There's also things called exchanges, where I'll exchange this volume of gas for this volume of gas to get it to market. Again, those are some of the items. I swore I was not going to do this, but you remember the old George Clooney movie, The Perfect Storm? A bunch of different events take place or situations take place. All of those pancaked on top of one another will cause a disturbance in what we'd like to think is a very stable commodity market. That doesn't always happen, but I'll get back with you all on that volatility and of the different three resources that you identified.
Please do. Okay. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Kason, I think this is kind of on the same thread. I was looking at some written testimony from Mr. Stewart for Rocky Mountain Power, and he was talking about, most notably, there is currently an unprecedented level of uncertainty in being able to accurately forecast NPC due to market and fuel prices. So that volatility, you were saying some of it is because of this perfect storm. Does Rocky Mountain Power think that there isn't going to be stability sometime in the future? Like how far in the future is Rocky Mountain Power predicting this to be able to have to ask for this large of an increase for the long term in their base rate.
Okay.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, once again, a very good question and a very not black and white answer. We look current day prices, we look out 1 year, we look out 2 years. Going beyond that far, even 2 years is kind of a stretch because of the volatility. Remember, these are open markets. There are no regulation on these prices. I think all of us in this room can probably, we've had the experience where we drive by a fuel station and the price is $1 when I went by it in the morning. When I go home at night, that thing might be up to about $1.20. So the fluctuation, the volatility, what those open markets, what that demand is.
That's an older rendition of the gas prices.
Well, you're dealing with an older person here for illustration purposes only. Illustration purposes only. So again, that fluctuation, Representative Yin, is very difficult. But again, there are people that are dedicated within our company that monitor that, they work at it, they look at those projected prices and what have you. There's, someone may pose the question, well, why don't you lock in the price today at this? Might be pretty attractive. Tomorrow, that price might be quite a bit lower. Making that judgment call today might be detrimental to our customers tomorrow. So again, there's a fine balancing act that goes along with that, but there are people that work on that on a continuous basis.
Representative Yin, follow up.
Does Rocky Mountain Power believe that there will be more extreme weather in the future that would cause continued volatility in fuel prices?
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, I'm not going to go out on the limb to say we are forecasting the weather to be X in a number of years. Will climate change continue? Probably. What impact will that have on decision making? And that will be determined.
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kaysen, so one of the things that I find interesting, so obviously Rocky Mountain Power is not in my area, we're tri-state. And so when I saw these numbers roll out, I made some phone calls just saying, hey, is this something we're going to expect across the board in power generation? And I believe in some ways that is a yes. I mean, when we had steel go up 200%, when we had wood go up in 1 year 540 and then plummet another 300. I mean, just it's kind of it is a volatile time. But I asked rate increase numbers are looking way lower. And so I think that the fact that we're seeing a rate increase question is not shocking. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, there's a rate increase question. If you go anywhere, I want to find your gas station, but my gas station, it's more like $5 for my diesel type of deal. So we understand your cost of doing business is ever increasing. That's the reality of it. You've got old utility-based, production-based systems that are needing updated. We get all of that. But I think that what's kind of scaring the entire populace is the fact that we're seeing 5% or 7% for a rate increase for one organization or one utility base, and then we're seeing closer to almost a 30. And so can you speak to that fact that, why is there such a discrepancy, and why? I mean, that's kind of the sticker shock issue I think everyone's having a problem with. Can you speak to that?
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Haroldson, I can speak to it to some degree. With the caveat that, again, we cannot compare apples to oranges. What may be relevant in cost recovery in one utility may not be the same reasons for another utility's higher rate increase. As I mentioned earlier, 97% of this increase is based on those commodity prices. For the company that you did identified, I don't know the mix that they have that would then, require them to seek rate relief. But again, this one is driven primarily by commodity increases that we experienced over the last several years and what we anticipate, at least in the forecast in 2024. I'm sorry that, again, I cannot give you a definitive black and white answer, but each utility is going to be different with their rate recovery activities or requests.
Representative Wiley.
Mr. Kasem, which states are part of the multi-state protocol?
Mr. Kasem.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, sorry. Representative for Rocky Mountain Power Company includes Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho. Under the Pacific Corp umbrella, then, the other three states within that multi-state protocol are the states of Washington, Oregon, and California. If I may, just for defining, northern part of California, not the entire state, and not the entire states of the other five that I have mentioned. It's within our certificated service territories in those respective states.
Representative Wiley, follow up.
Do any of those states have special requirements on the type of power that they will purchase?
Mr. Kasem.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Representative, as we have heard, the coastal states, Washington, Oregon, North and California, they have policies that have dictated that they will no longer accept fossil fuel power by date certain within those respective states.
Representative Wiley.
So is Rocky Mountain Power adjusting to those new policies that are coming into place?
Mr. Kasem.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we are adjusting the very best that we possibly can, keeping into consideration, we have other obligations to other states as well. And so when you're trying to balance the policies, the laws of 6 different states, yes, we are paying attention to that.
Representative Wiley.
2 more questions,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. I promise I'll try to keep it brief. The multi-state protocol that we follow, is that how you determine heavily on these price adjustments and such, the mechanism for that?
Mr. Kasem.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure I understand the question.
Sure. So earlier we talked with PSC and stuff, and they said, the multi-state protocol was very impactful to the way that we do these rate increases and stuff. So I'm asking you, does that protocol affect how we structure our rates?
Mr. Kasem.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wiley, for Wyoming rates, it's based on the costs of services that we incur for the benefit of our customers. Now, that said, we also take a look at the system-wide balances of everything that you have heard about earlier. You take the system costs, generally the entire system costs, and you heard earlier about 15% historically has been Wyoming's piece of that. So that's a component of it. But again, when we take a look at the cost of operating within the boundaries of our certificated service territories in Wyoming, that is going to be the main focus right there for the rate recovery or the rate increase.
Last question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you. So to your knowledge, Mr. Kasem, the multi-state protocol, does that hold precedence over interstate commerce?
Mr. Kasem.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I do not believe it does, but that would have to be a follow-up to your question up for the interstate commerce.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of discussion already about the multi-state protocol. And I'd like to offer to you and Chairman Case, the entire committee. This multi-state protocol seems like it's a magical bean out there. And so I'd like to offer to the committee is perhaps at your next meeting, since this is an educational 2-year interim type of topic, is that Rocky Mountain Power come forward with a session on the, or a topic on the multi-state protocol to learn more about it, how it works, some of the allocation methodology and what have you. If that would be of something would be benefit and maybe answer some of the great questions that I've heard today. Mr. Chairman, I offer that as part of the educational thing. Now, not to hide anything, we are going to do that for the Joint Minerals Committee as well. And so you might as well get the same benefit from that educational session, if I may.
Representative Haroldson,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One real quick question. What is the makeup of your energy portfolio?
Mr. Kaysen,
I'm sorry, makeup of
the makeup of your energy portfolio.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Representative, are you talking about just the commodities that we utilize? Are you talking about percentages of the generation?
Percentage of generation?
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, then again, this is going to be again, another follow-up question, if I may. I don't have that data in front of you. I was concentrating on the rate case, but great questions. And so, first of all, we utilize coal, we utilize natural gas, we utilize wind. This is system-wide again. There is hydropower within the system. So again, I want to make sure that I answer the question. Are we talking about system-wide assets or Wyoming asset or Wyoming only?
Mr. Chairman, system-wide assets, because the energy portfolio is going to dictate a lot on this rate increase and what is actually producing the power. And so I just was wondering if we could get a snapshot or a glimpse of the energy portfolio.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to provide both system and then I'm going to break it down to give you the Wyoming picture as well.
Okay, that sounds good. You've got a lot of homework so far.
I just get to pass it on, sir, to get the answers. Okay.
Senator Scott.
At this point, I would like to ask the question I asked the Public Service Commission earlier. When you look at the your capital part of your rate consideration, what is the value of the capital on which your rate of return is based, and how does it break down between generation, long distance transmission, and the retail service
Okay.
Part of it? And I was asking them in terms of what was it just before the rate increase, and you may want to comment on that, or comment on also on what the rate increase might do to that.
Mr. Kaysen.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, again, I want to be very cautious on this again, with the open dockets. I do not know if that is a part of the open docket information, but I will follow through to get that information if I can provide it outside of the general rate case open docket, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott.
I'm happy to get it. Anyway, if he'll specify what basis he's doing it on, I'm looking for some general information that the committee can use to just have an understanding of what's going on, and would also want to know what the current rate of return you're allowed on that capital is. Does it vary by the type of the capital, and is that an issue in the rate docket or not?
Mr. Kaysen.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, the current rate of return is authorized by the Public Service Commission, I believe is 9.3%. And I may need a little fudge factor on that one. The rate of return is established after the approval of a rate case filing by the Public Service Commission. That rate of return is in effect until the next rate case. It does not change for base rates. It does not change. The other, again, to repeat something you heard earlier today, the rate of return is an opportunity for the utility to earn up to that percentage. It is not a guaranteed rate of return. It's the opportunity to earn up to that. And so I'm also take this the one next step. Let's say that we had a dynamite couple of years and we earned well over that allowed rate of return. It would be incumbent on the company, or the Public Service could direct the company to appear before them for an adjustment on that rate of return. So again, it is not set in concrete permanently. It's based on every rate case application and subject to change based on over earnings, if I can use that term.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, a follow up on that. How long has that 9.3% return been there? And how has that varied over the past decade or so?
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, the current rate of return was established or set in the last rate case, which again was filed in the year 2020. And again, I do not have the historical data on what those percentages have been based on the prior rate cases. So to be responsive to that, Senator Scott, are you looking for a 5-year, a 10-year, the last 4 or 5 rate cases, something a little, so I can be responsive?
Mr. Chairman, at least 10 years and past 4 or 5 rate cases would make sense to me. One of the things I want to see is the volatility in it. How stable is it?
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I think the commission did answer that question earlier today. It's always been in a kind of a percentage range, 8+% up to 11% and what have you. Now that I think that response was kind of a general rate of return response versus specific to Rocky Mountain Power, but I will get you the information specific to the company.
Okay, Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Two-part question. The multi-state protocol, how often is that renewed and when is the next date for renewal?
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, I believe discussions are going on currently, and in 2024 is the next renewal date, if I may use that phrase, sir. But again, that is one that I will follow up with definitive dates and what have you. But again, it's just not the gathering of the respective states that meet every once in a while. There's ongoing discussions because there's ongoing rate activity that impacts the various states. But again, it's just not a one-time meeting and let's make a decision. So I will get you the current as well as the schedule on that, if I may.
Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then Representative Haroldson asked a question of your portfolio now, which you'll be getting to him. But I'm just curious, as you move towards satisfying Washington, Oregon, and California with the reduction of fossil fuels, could you also give a forecast of what your portfolio will be as that is implemented?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nass, yes, sir, I'll try to get that data.
Senator Scott.
Request if the committee chairman agree to your suggestion for a presentation on the multi-state protocol, could we have as part of that, what is the mechanism for a state to withdraw from that, and what are the consequences if we should decide that it is no longer in Wyoming's interest to participate in that? What are the consequences of that, and how do we go about it? Is there a provision there for how you terminate that? Say it no longer applies.
All right, looks
So,
like
Mr. Chairman,
Casey's got it.
I've captured that, Senator.
Okay, Senator Landon, did you want to jump in?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman, because I know you want to move on. Mr. Kaysen, I assume that similar rate hearings are taking place in all 6 states as we speak. Is that correct?
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, I will, there is, and there will be rate case activity in the other states.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, as a follow-on request to Senator Scott's request, as part of that, kind of basic information about what it takes to withdraw from that interstate compact, variation on that thing, what would it be like if we were to, sort of divide between have Utah, Wyoming, Idaho kind of separate from those three West Coast states. I think that would be prudent as well, considering we are a net exporter and those other two states are the two fastest growing in the nation. What would that process look like? Would it be different from Senator Scott's request?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Moore, to make sure that I capture that correctly, we would take the existing protocol, divide it in half. The Rocky Mountain Power states of Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho would be one entity. The three states to the west would be the other entities. Is that how, did I capture that?
And in addition to the notion of just separating Wyoming out
Separates, right,
completely, what would
just,
it look like if we took Utah and Idaho with us, basically?
Okay. Sounds like a collegiate conference expansion, so, or contraction in this case. Sorry.
All right. You got a lot of homework.
Yes, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, with your
Yeah.
indulgence, and I've probably gone longer than you were hoping. I want to make sure that I touch on a couple of questions that were asked when the Public Service Commission was here. And with your okay, I would like LSO staff to bring up page 16 of the Public Service Commission presentation, because we did not get to that one, and that'll kind of wrap up my comments, if I may. But
Page
Early-
16, the last page.
6, yes, sir. It was second to last page
Oh, before the question.
before
page.
the question and close out of that presentation. And once that, while that's being brought up, if I may, sir,
Go ahead.
Senator Scott did earlier today was talking about, and I hope I captured this somewhat accurately, about the return, the rate of return. Perhaps it's a perverse method where the utility may take advantage of that, overinvest, try to take advantage. Again, I would like to just offer from what it's worth. We've heard the terms earlier today. It has to be a prudent investment. It has to be a reasonable investment. It has to be a just investment. It has to be in the benefit of the public to make that type of a investment or a cost. So I think there is a protection absolutely in order by statute and by the Public Service Commission that would prohibit any utility to try to take advantage of that, the current method of establishing the return on a rate of return on that. So I hopefully there's a little comfort there that it's not in the best, it makes no sense to try to game the system, if I may. We talked about the that's enough. Okay. Okay. Thank you for allowing this one page to come up, because again, we did not do it. And I think it's kind of important that wraps up the two filings that are in front of the commission by Rocky Mountain Power as we speak. And I draw your attention, and it comes back to some of the questions that Senator Boner had as well. And I draw your attention to the last bullet first, where the base rates might include a base amount for the commodity cost. And the commodity cost rate then increases or decreases the total rate in response to the increases or the decreases in those commodity costs. And as I'd mentioned, our general rate case does include a component in the base rates for the net power costs or those net power costs. And that's kind of the methodology in that rate making component. And then I draw your attention to the sub bullet of the third bullet. Without the pass-on mechanism, utilities would need to have a general rate case if the commodity costs increased or decreased significantly. And so again, that's the benefit of having one of these energy cost adjustment mechanisms, is you can keep it on time. You can try to keep it balanced within the most recent 12 months of purchases, waiting for another rate case that could be year after year after year. So I think the Public Service Commission has a couple of good methods here with regards to the differentiation of the base rate and the pass-on mechanism. So thank you again for allowing me to utilize some of the commission's work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate. Oh, Senator Scott.
Following up on that last remark, in terms of what we've seen this year in rate increases, you had a commodity rate increase that was 7.6%. Am I Remember?
7.6%, the
Percent.
one that went into effect July the 1st, Mr.
And you've
Chairman.
asked for an additional 21%. So if I say the total rate increase is 28.6, I'm not double counting things, am I?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, in my opinion, you're just doing basic math from the two filings. You're taking the general rate case percentage overall increase, adding the energy cost adjustment and coming up with your rough number. But they are two separate filings.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to, when you do the, I guess, the commodity mix, I want to ensure that if purchase power is one of those commodities, that also be in it, not just coal, oil, gas, et cetera, that purchase power, it seems like that's also something that a utility would have to rely on as well. So I'd appreciate that being part of that mix. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Barlow, yes, if I may just kind of sum it up, what is in the portfolio? Owner generated, purchase power, purchase on the market, putting all four wheels on the car, if I may, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kaysen.
Yes, thank you, sir. Members of the committee, thank you as well.
Mr. Bush, we would hate to leave Black Hills out of this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Bush, representing Black Hills Energy today. Well, most days. We have, at the request of the committee, put together some information. We have a gas rate review that we're looking at right now. As you've heard, this is all really complicated stuff. For the basic kind of easy math, we're looking at about a 7% increase in base rates for our natural gas. This is the first we've asked for rates since 2019. Most of this is based on system integrity upgrades that we've done. As some of you know, depending on where you live, Black Hills Energy, or it's now Black Hills Energy Wyoming Gas, has acquired several different smaller systems throughout the state over the past 10 years or so. Even prior to my time, I've been with the company for 5 years now. So some of those systems needed a lot of work. We had some systems that weren't up to the quality that they needed to be to safely and reliably deliver the natural gas. So over the years, we've gone and upgraded some of those systems. There's a lot of federal regulation that comes in, PHMSA, which I'm going to forget all the letters, but it's pipeline safety. Federal Pipeline Safety Administration has certain rules and regulations that they require. There's more coming down. I just got a note, an email earlier today from the American Gas Association, which is kind of the national trade group for natural gas distributors like us. There's more rules coming down that stipulate engineering on pipelines and meters and all kinds of stuff. As was mentioned earlier, we are required to abide by those rulings, certainly from the federal government, but also from the state. So, and then we also have certain levels that we want to achieve as a company to make sure that safety is number one. We don't want leaks, any sort of problems. Natural gas, as you all know, is not something you want to screw around with. There's been plenty of stories recently, even 2-3 years ago in Casper, there was a natural gas pipeline explosion. Thankfully, no one was home, but there's issues with natural gas that we're not going to cut corners on that. So a lot of the rate increase that we're looking at, which is in front of the Public Service Commission now, is based on those system improvements that we've done over the past few years. Making sure we can find pipelines and pipe in the ground. There's electronic ways to figure out where the pipe is. So when, say, someone's digging on a construction project, they don't hit a pipeline and have a big nasty accident. So that's a big part of our increase on the natural gas side, which like I said, is before the commission right now. And we're going through the normal process of whenever we have something that we need to do, we get the CPC in, we go through the appropriate checks and make sure we do everything by the book. So that's a big piece on the natural gas side. On the electric side, get to my notes here. We had a base rate case that was approved in January of this year. Rates went effective March 1st. That was our first electric rate increase since 2014. And that again was mostly system integrity, pole lines, all that kind of stuff. There's for the members from Cheyenne is growing amazingly fast, and we are doing our best to keep up with the demand. We've got a lot of businesses moving into Cheyenne, larger industrial businesses, large data centers, EcoClaw, some other groups coming into Cheyenne. So we're doing a lot to keep up with the demand there and not have another incident like we had at the Capitol this year when you lost power for 3 or 4 hours. And that was an uncomfortable moment for all of us. So we're doing our best down there as well. And so those rates have been approved. That was about a 8%. It varies depending on the class, but it was about an 8% rate. And again, that was the first rate case that we've had since 2014 on the electric side. I don't think I had anything else, Mr. Chairman, unless there are questions from the committee or.
Co-Chairman Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure you can answer this, and it's okay if you can't, but comparing Black Hills electric side to Rocky Mountain Power's electric side, how do renewables affect each company the same or differently in terms of rate impacts?
Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, that is probably above my pay grade a little bit. I'm not into, I don't have all the information on what exactly the mixes are there. I know our system, we have coal in Gillette. YGen 2 is supplies coal power to Cheyenne. We have our gas plant east of Cheyenne Prairie Generating Station. We also have some market power that fills in the gaps. We have wind that we built, but it was on a contract basis that was specifically for customers that wanted wind power. It's about 52.5 megawatts. It's on the King Ranch west of Cheyenne. 35 megawatts goes to customers in Rapid City, and the other 17 goes to customers in our Cheyenne service territory that are specifically wanted that wind power. Larger businesses that had ESG or whatever goals they want to call them. They wanted wind, and it was cheaper for them, for us to build it for them and then contract with them for a 20-25 year rate. So that's what I know about our mix. I don't know how that reflects with Rocky or any of the other folks, how their systems are, but I can certainly, there's people smarter than me in Rapid City that can break that down, I'm sure, and I can get that answered for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Quick follow-up. So based on your answer, it seems like the wind you have is dedicated and paid for by specific customers. I don't know if that's true in totality for your company, if you have other wind, but that sounds very different than Rocky Mountain Power. Maybe you could give us more information.
Sure.
Mr. Bush.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I can get you more, basically the same question that Senator Scott had of the mix
Yeah.
for the generation.
And Mr. Chairman, I think it's important when we have a mix, in the case of Black Hills Energy, the wind that they have, and it may not be the totality of the wind that they have, but it's dedicated particular customers that pay for that wind and request that wind and want that wind. As opposed to Rocky Mountain Power, where it's, sounds like it's more wind in proportion, and it's not specific to customers. It's paid for by all of us. And if that's not true, please correct me. That's what I'm throwing out there.
Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Co-Chairman, I could certainly look into it. I'm not aware of any dedicated wind we have for our we serve Cheyenne. I should clarify that too. Our service territory for electric is basically Cheyenne, a little bit in the northeast, Newcastle area that's actually served by Black Hills Power, which is our South Dakota utility. Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power serves electric and natural gas service to Cheyenne. So the Cheyenne service territory, we don't have any wind that's specific for the whole rate base, customer base, other than just that wind that we built for some of those companies that wanted. But I can double check and make sure. I don't want to speak out of school. I know we do purchase some power on the market, and I'm not sure what that mix is, if it's gas or coal or wind or solar or what it might be, but.
Appreciate that. All right. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Yep.
Additional questions, Senator Scott?
And the question I've got, you heard us get an answer from Rocky Mountain Power. The rate of return which they are entitled to is 9.3%. What's the comparable rate of return for your company for electric?
Mr. Chairman, I was efforting to get that from my folks back in Rapid. I think it's about 9.75% on this last rate case, but I need to make sure with the appropriate folks. I found that a coworker shared the documents with me and helped me kind of find it, but I want to make sure with our regulatory team that that's the actual amount that we got. So I also am getting homework assignments. I'll make sure I follow up.
Appreciate that. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Bush. Appreciate you being here. So I am looking at a map of the Black Hills electric territory. Do you have, so we talked about with Rocky Mountain Power, they currently have like essentially a research rate for the carbon capture. Is there anything on Black Hills bills, customer bills right now for carbon capture compliance?
Mr. Bush.
That is a great question. I don't think so. The House Bill 200, sorry, Mr. Chairman, House Bill 200 allowed for up to a 2% surcharge, and that was for recovery of costs to implement the carbon capture. For us, I think it works out to about $6 million is all. So, or maybe it's 12. I'm getting all my numbers confused. I'm sorry. It's not very much. It's certainly not enough to cover the cost of a $500 million carbon capture unit, but it is enough to potentially cover some of the engineering costs, pre-feed studies and things like that. I'm not sure if we have asked for that yet. We may have. If we did, it's a smaller portion of it. We didn't do the full 2%. So, but I'll double check on that as well.
All right, we appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, general public comment.
This is Mr. Conrad.
What's that? Okay. Let's go ahead and bring the secretary in.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Chairman, Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I wanted to talk about my opposition to the Rocky Mountain Power rate increase, and then a couple statutory ideas that I wanted to address with the committee moving forward as we talk about these rate increases and how maybe the legislature can address them in statute. I'm opposed to the 140.2 million per year, that 21.6% general rate increase, and that energy cost adjustment mechanism of over 50 million. As the Wyoming Secretary of State, I want to highlight the effects that this will have on Wyoming families and small business, and why I do not believe that this is just, reasonable, or in the public interest. As Secretary of State, our office administers Wyoming statutes pertaining to the registration of for-profit and nonprofit corporations, limited liability companies, and other business entities registered with the state of Wyoming. We handle over 500,000 filings every year. And because of our affordable filing fees, enhanced customer service, and competitive cost of living, among other things, Wyoming, as we discussed yesterday, has become a premier destination for small business. This proposed rate increase is effectively shutting the door on small business by dramatically increasing the cost of one of their largest cost inputs, energy. And the effects of this increase on residential customers would be catastrophic. In concert with the property tax increases, we really need to have a cap, as we've talked about many years over in the legislature. Wyomingites on fixed incomes are being driven from our homes. And this really is a quadruple hit. I mean, they're hurting our core industries with their efforts to move away from coal, oil, natural gas, the inflation that the Green New Deal, quote unquote, is causing. And then they are now increasing rates to pay for these subsidies. And then on the back end, the costs that are involved with us through the joblessness of small businesses closing. I mean, it's a quadruple hit, what we're seeing from Rocky Mountain Power and from a lot of these groups pushing this green agenda. I also think that these rate increases are a security concern. With Trona mines facing a projected increase in power supply upwards of 30% from the rate increase, this rate hike will make it cheaper to buy Trona from China with their synthetic process than from right here in Wyoming. And by the way, I believe that synthetic process is a trade violation. I also remain deeply concerned and troubled that Rocky Mountain Power's proposed rate increase will force Wyomingites to foot the bill for awful federal and coastal state policies focused exclusively on decreasing emissions and propping up green energy as opposed to reducing rates for its customers. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion on this point. I've been listening quite a bit here today. But as you know, Rocky Mountain Power's parent company, PacifiCorp, has engaged in an exponentially increasing divestiture from Wyoming's core fossil fuel industries in favor of so-called environmentally friendly alternatives, such as federally subsidized solar and wind, which has resulted in commitments to close coal-fired power plants, including the Dave Johnston power plant in Glen Rock. And we really need to push back on that proposed closure. So I want to highlight a couple of questions, which is, why is Rocky Mountain Power providing a 5.36% annual dividend? And then also getting to Representative Harshman's earlier question about whether we're paying for these closures of baseload power with this cost increase. They acknowledge in the filing, Rocky Mountain Power, that this is largely for future costs, not sunk costs, a large percentage of this increase. Now, in terms of a couple statutory things that I think the legislature should look at, for one, I think this process where they can just throw any number on the wall and it begins a process where, you know, they move the Overton window, expand the Overton window, and then the process ends up somewhere in between. I think that we should have a system where it's, if they don't hit the exact level that they propose, then it is zero, period. And then that there's a lockout for a period of time where they cannot propose a rate increase. I also think that we need to incentivize them to have a more genuine estimate of their costs. We need to have specific public comment hearings for every single rate increase. I know it was talked about earlier from Commissioner Chairman Throne that they don't do that all the time. Sometimes just have a public comment period on their hearings. I understand they've got a workload, but I think at least there should be a trigger point where you have to have these public hearings. And then you get to the multi-state protocol and this allocation of costs that are created by renewable fuel standards, portfolio standards in other states, and that allocation. And I know they always get up there and they say that the originating state is paying for their costs, but I'm majorly skeptical of that. And I think we need to have a complete review of the multi-state protocol and our relationship with Rocky Mountain Power. Thank you. That's my comments.
Thank you, Secretary Gray, for joining us, and thank you for your comments. Committee, do you have any questions for the Secretary? No? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the room. Representative Conrad, welcome.
Chairman Olson, Co-Chairman Case, members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today. I'd like to preface my remarks by sharing with you, I am here to give you definitive answers. We're obviously here, probably ad nauseum at this point, but we're here to talk about the general rate case that's been filed by Rocky Mountain Power on March 1st, 2023, which increases an average rate increase proposed of 21.6% for Wyoming taxpayers, which would be effective January 1st, 2024. More specifically, the industrial users, such as those in the southwest corner, those rates, specifically Schedule 33 customers, are anticipated to see a 25% rate increase. Adding that 25% and or 21.6 rate increase respectively, Rocky Mountain Power has also proposed what's called the ECAMs, the Energy Cost Adjustment Mechanism, and that percentage increases averages 7.4%. So from my math, that's almost 34%. The major driver of this requested rate change by Rocky Mountain Power specifically has to do with their net power costs, which are being passed through. That has been the answer that we've received as an industry through the CEO, Mr. Hugavine of Rocky Mountain Power, passed through. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, Rocky Mountain Power has requested the approval to eliminate the adjustment, or more importantly, the energy cost adjustment mechanism, which currently is at 80-20 to 0. Rocky Mountain Power would then have no responsibility for the actual power costs in excess of those included in the base rates. Years ago, it was 70-30, is the 80-20 now. Now, Wyoming residents would pay for all of it with no sharing with Rocky Mountain Power. I want to share with you some remarks that I made last evening. Understanding that the Public Service Commission, which I'll refer to as PSC moving forward, gives, quote, paramount consideration to the public interest and, quote, the desires of the utility are secondary. The legal foundation for these rates, established in 1944, is based on the concept of, quote, fair, just, and reasonable rates. That has two central elements that we need to understand specifically. The first one is the recovery of prudently, I'll emphasize that again, prudently incurred costs. And secondly, the opportunity to earn a reasonable rate of return. The PSC has stated that the return on equity for stock owners should be commensurate with the returns on that investment in other enterprises with the similar risks. That value is currently set at 9.5%. I intend to go home and look at my portfolio, my 401k, to see if I can invest in those that have at least are guaranteed a 9.5, or not using the word guaranteed, but have the opportunity to return a 9.5% increase or return on investment. The PSC also noticed that the prudence of investment and expenses have some requirements that may be used to judge, again, the prudence of utility investments and expenses. I share with you 5 of those. That the expenses incurred are to meet the needs of the customers. Secondly, that expenses are necessary to provide adequate service. Expenses are considered to be reasonable, and that ratepayers will derive a benefit. And finally, by no means last, that burden is placed upon the utility. Rocky Mountain Power, as we speak today, is proposing effective January 1st, 2024, a revenue increase clearly articulated and documented in their communication to us as stakeholders and customers, not stakeholders, retract that. They have asked for a revenue increase of $140.2 million on Wyoming allocated basis. The return on equity that Rocky Mountain Power has articulated is 10.3%, above the 9.5 we've already talked about. Now, in fairness, the electrical utility, in this case, Rocky Mountain Power, says that fuel prices and extreme weather conditions are erratic and costly. And they are asking for the state, our PSC, to approve 2 rate hikes, the 21.6 and the ECAM adjustment around 7.4%. May I quote from Stacy Splitstrasser of Rocky Mountain Power, quote, "We are seeing some unprecedented prices in the open market, and we do not have enough generation to supply all of our customers with power. So we have to purchase it on the open market." I'll share with you that purchase price and that purchasing on the outside market has decreased, at least in Southwest Wyoming, an unbelievable, unprecedented decline in reliability. We've talked a lot about today the multi-state process. And let me clear this up and more importantly, reinforce or reiterate what's already been heard. The MSC binds 6 states, all under the umbrella of a Pacific Core, including Rocky Mountain Power, who shares 3 states, Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho. And also Pacific Power, which is California, Oregon, and Washington. Wyoming's share of this MSP is 15%. What concerns all of us is that as we speak today, there is no firewall between the Rocky Mountain Power and Pacific Core. They share liability. As you may or may not know, an Oregon jury recently awarded Pacific Core to pay for the damage as well as emotional distress of more than $70 million to 17 homeowners, with damages to be determined later for a broader class that may include owners of about 2,500 properties. Therefore, Rocky Mountain Power Wyoming customers, based on the MSP, could be exposed based on the MSP to pay 15% of that $70 million that already been awarded, not to mention the potential settlement costs or future costs and the 2,500 other property owners, which would likely amount to $1 billion. An example of Wyoming incurring costs outside the state also include, oddly enough, as per the Rocky Mountain Individual Resource Plan, the construction of 2 nuclear plants in Utah at the Hunter and Huntington sites. That plan puts a period at end of coal-generated power in Utah. This is in addition to the already published plans to eliminate coal power in Wyoming with subsequent coal mine closures. We would pay 15% of any investment outside of the state of Wyoming, specifically, as I've noted before, the nuclear plants in Utah. Oddly, may I point out, Wyoming is paying for the demise of coal generation, the very mineral that built this state. There's something wrong with this picture in my eye. From an industrial perspective, Southwest Wyoming, the ever-incurring cost of electrical power is further eroding Wyoming's natural soda ash business in a highly competitive commodity business. The ability of synthetic Chinese soda ash, which, as a note, requires more than double the amount of energy used for the natural production, to land on our U.S. soil, East Coast, is a clear and present danger. Of the total global soda ash capacity, 29% of the world demand comes from Wyoming. 71% comes from the synthetic, with China accounting for 40% of that 71%. Our natural soda ash, Wyoming, as a note, generates $452 million in payroll and tax value. It is also fact that soda ash in Wyoming is Wyoming's top globally exported mineral accounting for almost $1 billion in US trade. Those values were in 2021. This rate increase jeopardizes Wyoming employees, our industry, our citizens in this great state. As noted earlier, we've talked about this 21.6, 7.4, a number of different values. I want to share with you the US inflation rate right now is 3.18%. Consider that. Inflation has had a snowballing effect on family budgets. The typical American household spent $709 more in July than they did 2 years ago to buy the same goods and services, according to Moody's Analytics. Even though prices have soared, real earnings, which adjusted for inflation, are stuck at late 2019 values. Customers in Southwest Wyoming recently testified at a recent meeting regarding the proposed rates. And as you would imagine, all are opposed. One customer stated this could amount to almost a $90 increase per month extra for her. Quote, "I have hardly any money. I don't know where I'm going to get the money to pay for this. I just can't do this," she said with tears. Unless Rocky Mountain Power customers opt for some other option, solar, portable generators, etc., this utility is their only option. If a customer cannot pay, their electricity is shut off. Electricity is not a discretionary spending issue. It's a pocketbook issue. For some perspective, this year increases on our cost of a stamp, a US postage stamp, rose from 63 cents to 66 cents. The cost of mailing that letter is about a 5.4% increase. They said that that effort was necessary to offset the rise in operating costs. According to the US Department of Agriculture, the conventional price of a gallon of whole milk is $4.35. If you equate that into a 22% increase, that gallon of milk would now cost $1 more. If you had a rent for $1,000, obviously that's going to be a $220 increase in your monthly rate. It's critical and imperative that the PSC rejects the Rocky Mountain Power's rate increase and go back, as I reiterated before, the 70-30 ECAM sharing band, if not maintaining the 80-20. If such a rate, whatever that value, is absolutely required, that rate increase should be stretched or segmented out on a number of years. A 33% potential increase in 1 year is absurd. Finally, legislatively, I would promote the reviewing of the multi-state process to ensure that our value at 15% has a return on investment regarding our citizens. Our citizens need our help and your help and the Public Service Commission's help. Let's stop this insanity that their rate that we're being articulated to us as a rate increase at 21.6% at a minimum, and or an ECAMS at an adjustment value of 7.4%. I'd like to thank you for your patience, your attention, and your endurance throughout today. I appreciate it, and I stand open for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Representative Conrad. And boy, you don't understand endurance until you sit in one of these Lancer chairs all day. Yeah. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, want to ask Representative Conrad, and I really appreciate it. It seems to me that you've given some very deep thought to some of these issues. I gather from your comments that you think we ought to get a divorce from at least some of the multi-state protocol, at least separate from the West Coast states. Trying to think outside the box as to what do we do as things go wrong with this rate case. Do we need to look further and consider, could Wyoming get into some kind of create some kind of an electricity co-op to replace Rocky Mountain Power if our conventional means can't succeed in controlling the degree of inflation that is killing us here?
Representative Conrad.
Chairman Olson, thank you. Senator Scott, those are great questions. I do believe at a minimum, Wyoming is exposed. As you look at the most recent issues in Oregon and the jury awarding that type of money, we could potentially be on the hook for 15% of whatever value that is. Additionally, the investment of power plants in Utah, I don't see benefiting Wyoming, specifically in this case, nuclear. We all recognize, and the values can be changed and or are argued about. It's at least 80% of Rocky Mountain power is exported to other states. I just would prefer and ask the legislative body in this committee to review the legalities of the 15%, which my understanding of the MSP was recently signed in 2002. If we're coming up for renewal, I think it's our obligation to ensure that we as Wyoming and our citizens are not being penalized specifically for the demise of coal, the capital infrastructure elsewhere that has no benefit upon Wyoming, but we still pay for 15%. That's my ask.
Additional questions for Representative Conrad? Again, thank you for your well thought out and put together remarks. We really do appreciate it. Welcome.
For most of you, you know me. My name is Dick Merklin. I'm here today as a customer of Black Hills Energy. I'm also speaking on behalf of over 200 Black Hills users in Cheyenne. Secretary of State Gray and Representative Conrad did.
Please just make sure you address the chair.
Pardon me?
Make sure you address the chair.
The chair?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I just want to say that I applaud what Secretary of State Gray said and also Representative Conrad. He was very thorough and we all appreciate that. So I won't go on with that. I just want to say this with regards to Black Hills increases. It was said earlier today that they had been approved for one of their rate increases in January, I think, and it went into effect in April or May. That was $15,366,026. That was in May. On the 31st of May, they come back with another request, albeit in a different pot, of $19,262,412 annually. And I believe that's over on the gas pot. The electric pot was in January. So this year, what they've been approved for already and what they've got on the table before the PSC is $34,628,438. That's a lot of money. Earlier this month, I wrote a letter to the president and CEO of Black Hills Energy, Mr. Evans, and wherein I questioned him with regards to, and I'm not going to deal with as big of figures as everybody else has been dealing with, but I got a $3.50 increase on my service fee in May. That's a 26% increase. We're talking about 21.6 here and 7% there. That was a 25 or 26% increase over the $13 I had been paying. Now I realize $3.50 doesn't sound like very much to any of us present here. But I'm telling you this, there are 47,257 customers of Black Hills Energy in the state of Wyoming. of which there's approximately 44,634 of us living in Cheyenne. And of that number, I guarantee you there are customers of Black Hills that a $3.50 increase is taking a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk out of their family's budget for food, and they can't afford it. Yeah, I agree with what has been said previous. Mr. Chairman, we all need to take a good hard look at this. I realize that the PSC isn't controlled by you folks on this committee, but they deal with utilities that control all of our lives. And in most cases, we are a captured customer. We can't go anywhere else to get our gas or get our electricity. We're stuck, except I won't even say it. I shouldn't say it, but I apologize to those that I talked to earlier. I promise not to say this. You have other sources of power available in the renewable field, and that's all I'll say about that part of it. All I can say, if you extrapolate the $3.50 a month out on what Black Hills is taking in, and the letter I wrote to the chief man at Black Hills, he got me in contact with the customer service department for Black Hills Energy for the entire company. And they operate in about 6 states, and they purport to have 1.3 million customers. During the conversation I had with this customer service representative, I asked him if the $16.50 that those of us that are on Cheyenne Black Hills Energy would be a median of the road, middle of the road charge for the 1.3 customers. And he said, yeah, that would be, generally speaking, that would be a fair assessment, $16.50. All right, take the $16.50, multiply that by the 1.3 million that they say they have, and it can go up or down, but you multiply that out, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars every month before they even start to consider what we use for the kilowatt hours we got to buy from them on our bills. And I don't know how many of you on the committee review your electric bill every month, but mine has gas and electric combined on one bill from Black Hills Energy. The service charge on the gas side is $20. So I'm paying close to $36.50 in service fees. But just talking about an average $16.50 times 1.3 million. You're talking tens of millions of dollars, and they're wanting rate increases to boot. I realize that this money, the $350, goes into operating expenses and a very, very small portion of it for infrastructure. Mr. Evans is the CEO of Black Hills Energy, made $3.6 million last year in income. I wonder how much more he's getting with the cost that he's already added on to our bills now. Like I say, I'm here on behalf of 200 other customers of Black Hills in the Cheyenne area. What they're doing is highway robbery. We're way past the nickel and dimes. We're in the hundreds of dollars in increased bills. And Mr. Chairman, I don't see where we can afford to keep on living and paying our bills. I know some of those that got the $350 bill for services are going to be unable to pay their electric bills at some point in time because they need to feed their kids et cetera. And then they're gonna, the company is Black Hills Energy, and the other ones don't care about what they're doing to us. They haven't looked at the poverty stricken people that are at the bottom of the ladder that they're assessing this fee to, and they'll shut their electricity off in the blink of an eye. I'll answer any questions I can. I also, if anyone want the letter that I wrote to the president CEO, I asked him to also explain all the charges on the bill, because there's now the rundown on the bill, if you look at it, has got several items on there that I don't know what they are. There's two that have been added, that one of them was added due to the tax bill that was put, that we all got a piece of the pie on that. But if you look at it, you might be interested in what your bill actually charges you for. And I will say this, on my bill, there's two areas there that there's a minus figure, which means they took some of the bill away. I don't know how long that's going to last. Like I say, the benefit that we're getting right now is something to do with the COVID tax rates and everything else that they had going around for businesses. So I'm done. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. And like I say, if anyone wants a letter and an explanation of all these charges, your bill may look different than Black Hills Energy's does, but I bet it's got the same figures on it with regards to what all of these assessments are that you have to pay every month.
Mr. Merklin, thank you for driving up here today. Thank you for your comments and your thoughts. Committee, you have any questions for Mr. Merklin? All right.
I got off easy. Thank you.
You got off easy. Yep, that's right. Thank you. Additional public comment. What does the virtual world look like? Welcome, Ms. Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be very brief. I know it's been a long day and you've still got much of your agenda to go. My name is Jody Levin. I'm here today on behalf of the Trona Industry and the Wyoming Mining Association. I'm not going to go through the comments that I had prepared because Representative Conrad did an excellent job of summarizing the concerns of not just the Trona industry, but the mining industry. I did testify last night at the public hearing. I want to thank the legislators who came to that and Secretary of State Gray for his comments as well. This is an enormous concern to your industrial ratepayers. It's a concern to your residential ratepayers as well. As Representative Conrad indicated, this is a 33% combined rate increase for the industrial class. Rocky Mountain Power's load is 70% industrial class in Wyoming. So this is a significant hit to those companies that are major employers, and certainly in Southwest Wyoming, this is a huge concern to the Trona industry because it does threaten the economic competitiveness of those companies. So we appreciate you looking into this matter. There are specific issues within the rate case that we really have urged the Public Service Commission to scrutinize on the basis of whether those were planning decisions that the shareholders should share a burden in and a great burden in, or whether those are appropriate costs for the customer base to bear. It is our belief that this transition, and they speak to this in their integrated resource plan and on their website and in prepared testimony, that this is an accelerated transition and that they talk about meeting aggressive goals and ambitious goals to adhere to the policies of other states. The policies of those other states are running counter to the interests of Wyoming. And so there's much at stake here. We appreciate you taking an enormous amount of your agenda to focus on this issue, and we intend to be engaged throughout the process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the brevity. Additional public comment in the room? Welcome, ma'am.
My name is Candy Lurson. I live here in Douglas, south of Douglas a bit on Irvine. I have a master's degree in business administration. I have extensive experience in preparing environmental assessments and environmental impact statements when I worked for the government. I'm now retired and a volunteer. I can tell you that living down on Irvine with Rocky Mountain Power, our power is out once a week or at least every other week. And it was out for 15 hours last winter when it was 22 below. Living in a trailer, of course, my pipes under my trailer froze and there was no other way to get them warmed up. I'm concerned that maybe Rocky Mountain Power should be putting more interest into their current infrastructure and not into wind farm expansion. I was at the meeting last night. There was over 150 people there in a very small room and extended out into the two other rooms. At least here we can hear, when we're sitting back here, we can hear what you all are saying. There we couldn't hear. If you weren't in the main room, you couldn't hear what was going on. It was very inconvenient. The response of the public was entirely negative, and for many reasons. Most people spoke on the rate increase and how it would impact their pocketbooks. Do we have any choice in what Rocky Mountain Power invests in? How much does a windmill blade cost? One of the people last night said that the CEO, over the last couple of years, their income, the CEO of Rocky Mountain Power, salary has increased by millions. Like, I think it was from 2 million to 8 million over a few years. That's incredible. Is anybody watching this? Now, these windmill blades, another person said that the windmill blades are mounting up in the landfill at Casper. 1,800 of them. I know the number was 18 and the lowest denominator would have been 1,800. It could be 18,000. I'm not positive which, but even 1,800, they're huge. They are not biodegradable. How is this green? How is this good for our country, for our land? The other thing is they don't last very long. They have to be replaced every 4 years. So depending on how expensive they are in the first place, and if they only last 4 years, and then what do you do with them when their life expectancy is over? It doesn't sound reasonable to me. But this is not all about costs. There's other costs that are not being addressed. Other costs than our bills. There's an article in the Cowboy State Daily, which is not known to be very conservative, but it had some good facts in it. And this is by Kevin Callot, dated August 22nd. The Canadian province of Alberta has placed a moratorium on large wind projects until February. The goal is to give provincial government time to study how wind developments impact the electrical grid, the environment, and the province's natural landscape. In fact, Senator Case, you're quoted in this article. You think that the state should take time to make sure that Wyoming has sound policies in place to protect residents from long-term damage. So the other considerations that I would suggest we should be considering is, especially since I worked for the Forest Service and know a bit about wildlife, save the eagles, not to mention the other birds. And we're in a migratory bird pattern. They fly from Mexico on up to Canada to nest every summer and then back again, all kinds of birds. And what about the whales? They're being impacted in other parts of the country because the sound from the wind blades messes up their sonar. Oh, what else has sonar that flies? In the Forest Service, they're always concerned about the bats. Got to be impacting the bats at night. I've read an article that it impacts dairy herd production. That the sound of the blades, if they're near a dairy herd, that it lowers milk production. Okay, what does that do to our cattle? Are we going to have lower weight calves to sell in the fall? So we have what harm to wildlife. We have landscape view degradation, and that was another thing that was important to the government. What's your view like? Is somebody trying to destroy it? I think windmills are ugly. I'd a lot rather see the rolling plains or the hills than those monstrosities that they had out there. And they want lots and lots and lots and more of them out there. So it ruins the view. There's an expense of buying it. Apparently we're paying for it. Apparently we're buying these extra windmills. There's the expense for recycling, or maybe they're just being piled up, and maybe the Rocky Mountain Power isn't being charged for storing those useless blades when they're done. Solar isn't that much better in my view. I happen to know that underneath the solar panels, it kills all the vegetation. You can't even have a rabbit living under there because it's too hot. So as far as the eagles, in this article, it talked about it quoted Jim Wiegand, an independent wildlife expert in California. He said that the wind companies are downplaying the impacts to the eagle populations that wind farms are having. There's a lot of killing that doesn't get reported. Oh, that's interesting. Eagles are being killed. In the federal government, they call that a taking. If one of us would shoot an eagle, that's a taking, and we would be fined for it. Are these wind farms being fined for the number of eagles that they take? Mike Lockhart, a wildlife biologist specializing in eagles in Wyoming, worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, said the agency, he agreed, the agency is underestimating the number of eagles killed every year by spinning wind turbine blades. Now, at first I thought that was kind of ridiculous. You would think that an eagle could avoid a blade, but apparently the tip of the blade is traveling at 170 miles an hour. And there's a draft that pulls them in. So it wasn't so ridiculous. So I would suggest there's an elephant in the room, or maybe we should say there's a donkey behind the scenes that's driving this. Okay, not eagles. Next one. No Green New Deal. We don't need a Green New Deal here in Wyoming. Maybe they want it in California and Delaware, but we don't need it here. It hurts us here. I'm suggesting that the wind farms, building new wind farms is being driven by this Green New Deal and by federal subsidies encouraging it, and by federal regulation discouraging the use of coal and oil and gas. We in Wyoming love coal and oil and gas. It makes sense for us. Why should we be paying for wind farms so that Oregon and Washington can have their little dreams about a Green New Deal? And that's all I have to say, but I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you, ma'am, for all your comments. Thank you for sticking with us throughout the day as well.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. Additional public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Colt Rodeman. I'm a citizen here in Douglas. I live way west of town. Appreciate you giving opportunity for people to come speak to this rate hike. It'll be a devastating thing. I'm a small-time farmer, rancher. but I have two of them electric machines called pivots. One of them's a 120 that's cheaper than the 3-phase. And if this rate hike goes into effect, hay prices are going to be very outstanding on my place. But the main reason that I'm here is you're talking about a potential 30% rate hike if you put everything together. Why don't we talk about a 30% reliability increase from them in their services, in the power that they provide, and everything else? You've heard people talk about power being out on their places and stuff like that. I don't see any increase in reliability or services at all. Now, you call them up, it might be a week before they get to you. In some instances, you need it now. So if they can't guarantee one thing, why give them another? And then as far as being involved in the multi-state thing, I'd like to see you guys step in and say, no, we don't need to worry about the West Coast. Let's worry about Wyoming. That's the main thing, is let's worry about us first and look to others afterwards. I think we can produce enough energy right here in this state that we could sell it to wherever. And if they don't like our coal, gas, or hydro, they can look someplace else. I know we're producing wind and stuff like that, but they still got to put the power lines in. So with that, I'd entertain any questions.
Any questions, committee? All right, sir. Thank you for your time and your comments
Thank
as
you.
well. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Gigi Lehman. I'm from Commerce County. My background is in ag. And as you know, the state seal is mining and ag. And with that said, what's disturbing is how much the people are being choked by rate increases. I mean, who isn't increasing rates? And with that said, in Commerce County, for instance, in the ag industry, our illustrious county assessor actually finds it as cute to call it a love letter when she increased agriculture industry significantly. And when challenged about it, actually said it was, well, we need to do that in order to increase the oil and gas industry. Oh, thanks. And so added private property this year to it. And if we didn't fill that out, she just arbitrarily listed what she thought it was and what the value was. And so the rate of that is pretty significant, and nobody that I know of has yet put pen to paper to figure out what that increase actually weighs out to be, because who really wants to look at how ugly that looks? You can just tell by the numbers that it already is ugly. And with regards to the Rocky Mountain Power, you know, I thought in America we were supposed to stop these monopolies, but obviously that didn't happen. And so now here we are, and we have this Rocky Mountain Power issue. And, you know, what's a problem is this is a necessity for life in Wyoming. And we're going to increase this rate in the winter, in January. How handy. And, you know, the fact of the matter is it's your all's job to actually help the people. And I understand you look at the industrial side of it, but this seems to be awfully weighed to the industrial side. There is no real balance between the two with the people, the constituents that actually elect you. Not to say that the power industry doesn't throw some money your way, but anyways, the fact of the matter is it's the people that elect you. And so, and it's usually not the people of this company that's actually your constituents, they're somewhere else that are overseeing, you know, dealing with these issues. Their shareholders and so forth that are profiting big dollars from it. And so when you guys talk about, well, they have a constitutional right to, you know, be able to get, you know, a rate back in return for their investment. I say, it really needs to be reasonable, and this is not reasonable. If anybody was looking at common sense, that seems to have let out the door anymore. It's not so common anymore, but try is what I would ask. And so with that said, our life and liberty and pursuit of happiness is being choked. And we're being choked so much that they just then bend us over and take our wallets out from ourselves to help themselves to this money. Otherwise, what is our alternative? We don't have one for power. We don't have an alternative. And in America, I find that very sad. And furthermore, I just want to close with, I'm sure you all see the big picture. This is a war against the people. And it's not just in energy, it's in technology, it's in everywhere. And we're globally thrown into the throes of all of this. And by God, they want to take us down. And Wyoming is only 600,000 people, and we are expendable. They would love to have our place. And it's up to us to rise up and give a care and fight for it and say, well, I know it's a great place, but we were here first. And so we're going to stay here. And my husband's ranch, its family was founded for its ranch in the 1870s before Wyoming was a state. And so we're pretty partial about this state and wanting to keep it. And my kids are 5th generation on that piece. And I'm just going to say, for the love of God, let's not have our state stolen from us. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments. Additional public testimony. Still got the one online. We'll get to the online world as soon as we finish up the physical world. Go ahead and turn on your mic. Yep.
Okay, so I look at things pretty simply here. And
Sir, if you could just introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Aaron Lohr. I live here in Douglas too.
Thank you.
Because I'm pretty simple, I look at things simple ways. I see this as difference between helping out shareholders, stockholders, or your grandmother. They can't afford to live in their house anymore because of property taxes and because of this, that, and the other thing. At some point, you all are here to help the citizens, I believe. And I know this isn't your deal, it's whoever else, but you have the power to kind of edge things along. But that's, for me, that's a simple fact. I mean, we're a democratic republic, not a corporocracy. So we really should look after our citizens first, corporations second. And you have to have electricity, I get that. But in the back of my mind, I'm asking myself, why isn't the state of Wyoming have their own company and sell electricity itself? I mean, again, I'm pretty simple, so there's probably a lot of reasons why not. So there you go. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, come on up. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and let us know what you'd like us to hear.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Don Lurson. I live in Converse County. And I'd like to reiterate what the previous public speakers have said. I won't go back and capture all their thoughts. I know I've seen your heads nodding up and down and shaking sideways. And so I know you've heard what they've said. I would make a point that where I live, most of the grid, as it were, the power lines and all are 10 to 20 years old. But the grid that feeds that, the power lines that feed our little grid are over 50 years old. And as stated by a previous speaker, the power goes out routinely. Indicates to me that there is a lack of preventative maintenance going on. The infrastructure is aged, we know that. Most often the power goes out at night during a storm, which means overtime's being paid. considerable overtime when you call out 10 to 12 people to find something and it takes 6, 7 hours to find it. And then it takes another 3 or 4 hours to fix it. If that work was done during regular shift work in the daytime, preventative maintenance, maybe we wouldn't have those outages. The company wouldn't have those costs. So it's just something to think about. The other thing I'd like to mention is that I'm deeply disappointed at the lack of attendance at this meeting today in Converse County. I would have thought, especially based on last night's meeting in Casper, that there'd be a lot more people here. So I'll keep expressing that to people throughout the county, but I do thank you guys for being here and listening to us. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Any other public testimony? All right, let's go to our Zoom world. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Can you
all
hear
right?
us?
Do you hear me?
Oh, yep. Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Chairman Olson, Chairman Case, and the committee members. My name is Austin Rushoff. I'm an attorney with Holland and Hart, and I appreciate you allowing me to testify remotely today. I'm here on behalf of the Wyoming Industrial Energy Consumers, or WIAC, an unincorporated association of approximately 20 large industrial energy consumers who take electric service from Rocky Mountain Power. I think you all are familiar with some of my colleagues, Thor Nelson and Abby Briggerman, who have testified before this committee before, and I'm here to follow up on some of their prior remarks. There's been a lot of great testimony today, and I had a lot of things to say that have already been said, so I'll try to keep it a little brief. Collectively, WIAC members represent approximately half of Rocky Mountain Power's Wyoming load. WIAC members are major producers of natural gas, trona, oil, phosphates, sulfuric acid. WIAC members employ thousands of people in Wyoming, and they make up a sizable percentage of Wyoming's economy, both in jobs and taxes paid. Employees of WIAC members work in nearly every county in Wyoming. WIAC has been in existence for over 20 years and has been very involved during that time in Wyoming Public Service Commission proceedings. Our main goal in these proceedings is to keep rates low and ensure that electricity is reliable. For WIAC members, the cost of electricity is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, expense in conducting business. Our members pay sometimes millions of dollars a month in electricity service from Rocky Mountain Power. And they understand that low electricity rates are vital to our business interests and critically important as well to the state of Wyoming in attracting and competing for new business. Rocky Mountain Power ratepayer bills have been increasing for years and not very slowly. 10 to 15 years ago, Wyoming had some of the lowest industrial electricity rates in the country. Today, we're right about in the middle, ranking around 25th in the country of industrial electricity rates. This has certainly impacted Wyoming's ability to attract industrial businesses. So WIAC is involved in both of the two major Rocky Mountain Power rate cases we've been talking about today, the general rate case and the ECAM, Energy Cost Adjustment Mechanism case. I just wanted to highlight two issues that have been discussed a little bit that WIAC has taken significant positions on and are the biggest concerns for us in the rate case. First is the 80-20 power cost sharing mechanism that we've talked about quite a bit here. As Representative Conrad spoke about, it used to be a 70-30 share. Now it's 80-20. Rocky Mountain Power proposes to do away with it completely, so it can pass all of its power costs on to customers. We believe that this sharing mechanism is a very important aspect of Rocky Mountain Power's rates to ensure that the company has skin in the game and an incentive to keep power costs as low as possible. So in the rate case, we've advocated to maintain that at least 80-20, if not move it back to the prior 70-30. A second big issue that's been talked about here is the company's return on equity. It is currently set at 9.5%, Rocky Mountain Power has proposed to increase it to 10.3%. WIAC recently filed testimony in the rate case, and our expert consultant recommended that the commission approve an 8.6% return on equity for Rocky Mountain Power. Our consultant did analysis of DCF models, discounted cash flow models, comparison to other utilities across the country and in the region, and found that 8.6% return on equity is both fair to the company and its shareholders and will result in more reasonable rates for customers. This proposal alone on the return on equity would reduce Rocky Mountain Power's proposed rate increase by somewhere in the neighborhood of tens of millions of dollars, but perhaps $30 million. And finally, I want to emphasize that WIAC's advocacy in the Rocky Mountain Power rate case will impact all Wyoming ratepayers. We are, of course, representing industrial customer interests, but the positions we take will also benefit residential customers, commercial customers, all customer classes. Ultimately, the final position WIAC has put forward, like I said, on August 14th through our testimony, we recommend that Rocky Mountain Power's rates be reduced by $20 million. This is in comparison to the company's request to increase rates by $140 million. So I would just like to let the committee know, and anyone else in the room that's interested, that WIAC stands ready to answer your questions and serve as a resource. We spend a considerable amount of time and effort investigating the company's rate increases and participating in Public Service Commission proceedings. And we're here to share the information that we found through our investigation. All of our testimony that we filed on August 14th from 4 expert consultants is available from the Public Service Commission's online docket. So I urge you to go look for that, or we could send it along if that would be helpful to the committee. And also, I urge you to reach out to me. Like I mentioned, my colleagues Abby Bergerman and Thor Nelson, who have testified before this committee before, and also Bob Jensen, who many of you know, who works with us on these matters. So that's the comment I wanted to provide today, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Committee, questions for Mr. Rushoff? All right, thank you, Mr. Rushoff.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any more public testimony online? No? Any more public testimony in the room? Anyone else? All right, with that, I will close public testimony. Committee, before we move on, any thoughts, actions? Senator Boner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we've spent most of our time talking about the rate case, rightfully so, but also had a little bit of discussion about reliability. So I just thought I would move to get a bill drafted for consideration at the next meeting, fleshing out the current requirement in 37-18-102, paragraph A 5, uppercase A, which establishes a baseline standards for reliability, but there's no real teeth with the Public Service Commission. And so the bill draft would, and this is very conceptual, forgive me, but would give the Public Service Commission some teeth to enforce that. And so to come up with a baseline reliability and then fine a company if it doesn't meet that reliability standard. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but if there's already statute in Maine, maybe we just we'll use that as a starting point. So hopefully that's clear as mud.
Is that clear as mud? I'm actually getting a good solid head nod. All right. Any objections, committee? No. Senator Landon's objecting. Oh, okay. Yep. Senator Scott, you were next.
Several suggestions for bill drafts. Let me sort of go in order. Mr. Chairman, I think if we're going to have to possibly do some very radical things in here, one thing we need to have certainty about is the reclamation costs that we're facing with these large coal-fired power plants. In particular, thinking Jim Bridger and Dave Johnson here, but also applies to the I believe Dry Fork, they call it up in Campbell County. And I think the Naughton one is passed, but then there may be an implication there too. What I'm going to suggest is that we really need to nail these down, and that I want a bill draft that would ask the DEQ to specify what they need to do, and come to the next meeting with a potential budget for it, in terms of these, getting these sites in compliance with the current cleanup requirements, and ask the PSC to define how much of that has already been recovered in the rates, so that we know what we're up against and we don't wind up paying for it twice, which is one of my fears. Mr. Chairman, that'd be my request. I've got a lot of the specific language written, be happy to discuss it and help the LSO come with the specific bill draft for next time. So that's first.
All right, we'd appreciate you getting with LSO on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Second one, in what was the House Bill 200 is now WS 1718-102. I believe it's B(3). There's a provision there that what it does is allows collection ahead of time for potential costs for carbon capture on these large coal-fired power plants. Frankly, I think that particular provision was a mistake. When it was done, the market for the CO2 was not very good. The price of oil was down under $40, as I remember. That's below the break-even point for being able to finance one of these with a carbon capture. And my suggestion is that we repeal that provision. The world has changed enough, so I think we ought to stop thinking about a taxpayer or a ratepayer financed carbon capture system, make them work in the private sector. And Mr. Chairman, it's only 0.5%, I think, on the rates was the testimony we had today. But I think getting rid of that ability would be worthwhile, and suggest a bill draft in that area. The third one would be, I think we're getting overloaded with the wind and the solar, at least in the Rocky Mountain Power energy mix, and would like to see a bill draft that would have a 1-year moratorium on approval of new wind and solar projects to go into the Wyoming ratepayers rate base. I think we ought to be able to allow it for anybody else wants to build in Wyoming for their rate base, but for approval for inclusion in the Wyoming rate base, and give us a year to figure out what percentage can we really tolerate in the rate base at the current technology, and should be a moratorium on some of that storage technology until we get better certainty that it's going to work. We're getting enough out there to get some experience, Mr. Chairman. So that's the third suggestion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to work with the LSO on all those.
Appreciate that. Josh, you good? Okay. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and appreciate the senator's work. I wondered if there was any consensus on the committee that maybe we encourage our chairman to forward at least some concerns or reflect the tenor of this meeting at the very least to the Public Service Commission. I don't know if there's precedent for that. I don't know if we've ever done it in the past. I can't think of a better time for us to express that concern than now, and it may be reflective, I don't know, maybe even unanimously on this committee. I'm not sure, but I know I feel pretty strongly that we ought to forward to that commission what's been reflected today and some deep concerns about the ramifications if we don't step very carefully on this front. And
Co-chairman
I'm looking
Case?
at the two co-chairmen
I'm looking at
because
you. Your thoughts on a letter from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, certainly, and for the public and everybody, the commission takes written comments. They treat them as comments, but they're going to have some, perhaps some stature if it comes due to a resolution from this committee. That might be even better. An informal resolution or a formal resolution from this committee itself expressing concern about this rather than a letter from the chairman. And we'd be happy to work online back and forth to get the committee kind of on board with that, but that might have a little bit more stroke. It would just be a comment. It's not going into the actual, it goes in the case file, but it's not the same as an intervener comment, but I think that's good strategy.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, following up on that.
Your
Excuse
mic
me,
went up.
does the timing permit that to be drafted and then approved as a resolution of the committee at our November meeting, or is that too late in the PSC process?
I feel like we're gonna have another meeting between now and November, just so we can, I mean, we've already added 4 bills so far, and there's more hands coming up. We may have to, I don't know if we can get through all of that in our November meeting, if we maybe need another meeting before November. I'm just shooting that out right now. So I haven't talked to co-chairman Case, but we may add an extra day before November meeting.
And Mr. Chairman, by way of the schedule, I believe it's the 24th or 25th of October when they begin their open hearings with Rocky Mountain Power. It's scheduled to go at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. So it's going into November. If I was thinking we do the resolution online, sharing drafts back and forth. But I'm open. It'd probably be fine to be after that date. They wouldn't have made a decision in the docket yet.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow on the good Senate Chairman, I think you're really onto something. I would be happy to work online with the rest of the committee to develop whatever resolution we have in mind. I think there's some urgency because I just don't think we've got another meeting to get it completed in time.
Well, we could have one in October. We could have another meeting, take
I
more
thought
public
the
testimony.
PSC hearing is on October 25th. Is it?
Yeah, maybe we would try to have something before then. I don't know if that's.
Mr. Chairman, I think we have to have it completed before those hearings begin, do we not? And our next meeting isn't until after the hearings are already underway.
And Senator Landon, I think what Mr. Chairman is suggesting is that we request another meeting from Management Council and that we have that maybe on this issue.
My mistake.
Seems to be to expedite consideration on this proposed resolution from the committee. The commitment would be to have a draft to you for that special meeting. And we might work with other members of the legislature that are interested in this topic, like Mr. Representative Conrad, and then come to the committee with a draft that we could approve at that meeting. And it would be posted for the public in advance, like our normal materials.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for not picking up on where you were going, and I appreciate that. I think that's a great plan. I'm supportive of that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm not sure where that came.
Well, Josh, yes.
Yeah, just wanted to note to you guys, your next meeting is scheduled for October 26th and 27th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's coming up relatively quickly.
But if we could find like a 1 day or a half day in early October, that we could have a meeting specifically to the rate increase.
That date actually might work, because the commission will, they'll be in the middle of hearings, which I'm supposed to be at, by the way. But so they'll be going days after that meeting. So if we were to come up with written material to submit to the commission during those 2 days,
okay,
that would actually work.
Mr. Chairman, if you feel like as co-chairman that it would work, I'm right behind you on that. I think maybe we could work on drafting something that we could look at that meeting. As long as we had the opportunity to come out of that meeting with something, I'd be supportive of that as long as you think that's soon enough to get that in front of the commission. I just want to make sure they see that concern that we carry forward on this committee.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
checking my calendar, the Rocky Mountain Power Rate Committee meeting or rate hearings start on the 23rd of October. And they're scheduled to go through the 20th or no, I take that back. No, 23rd. I am so sorry. My calendar is very confusing, as I am very confused. They start on the 16th, according to this, and finish up on the 27th. So that may not work. For a letter. I'm going to try to look that schedule up, make sure I don't have it wrong. I apologize. That was some early information. Does anybody know? Mr. Kaysen, you know. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Co-Chairman, with the caveat, I heard and I repeated because of my notes, Chairwoman Throne said the evidentiary hearing begins on October 25th and is planned to go into early November. That is what I heard today and that I have in my notes. So I offer that from what it is worth.
And Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Kaysen's exactly right. My scheduling was an earlier version and the schedule was revised. And so that would actually fit for the committee to have a meeting and make it work without an extra meeting. Although we have a tremendous workload ahead of us.
Mr. Chairman, as long as you're confident that we can get whatever comments the committee might want to come out of that meeting with, as long as we're confident that it can get across the street to the commission and at least be heard or read, I'd be good with that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Mr. Co-Chairman.
I would think that this resolution that the committee proposes would not be extremely detailed. It would be at a somewhat high level, so that it is more policy directed rather than specifics. And that would make it more likely that we could reach a consensus and move it out.
Okay. So it sounds like we might be able to make it work. I like it. Representative Wiley.
I think that we might want to look at something to do with the multi-state protocol, either lessening our commitment to that or putting some options on the table for us to readjust there. Anybody can jump on that wagon if they have any ideas.
How do we do that?
Yeah, that's the question.
Well, we can look at either a reduction of what we want to commit to on our percentages, maybe reduce to 15. Or review altogether of our commitment to that.
Senator Scott. Your mic.
I think the percentages are fixed based on the usage. So that's probably not feasible. I think what we need to look at is how do we withdraw from that if that's a prudent thing to do? So maybe what we need to do at this point is request a bill draft that would do that, and then we can decide. We've asked for a good deal of information on that protocol for that October meeting. We would then have the basis for being intelligent, but that if we requested a bill draft, then we'd have something to go on, something to work with.
Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm okay with that, but I wonder, in the reason we have a multi-state protocol is to divide up what's called the system assets. And I happen to believe that there are assets that are counted as system assets and expenses that are counted as system expenses, and things from other states that are system policies that really don't belong as considered as a system asset. And just hypothetically, if the new transmission that we've seen which is incredibly expensive and has a significant investment, if that is predominantly to take wind power and other renewables out of the state and has to have no benefit to Wyoming customers, then that should be excluded from being under the protocol as a divided up asset. There are other things like there are northwestern states that have a protocol where they have a tax on carbon. And yet we pay for that in the 85-15%. I mean, we pay our percentage for another state's increasing the cost of carbon. I'm not sure that that's a policy that we would want to do as Wyoming. So these are the kind of things that I think you could keep the multi-state protocol in place, but yet try to exclude some costs from that.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott.
could we then ask, instead of a bill draft that would pull us out of the protocol, one that's more along the lines that Senator Case was just suggesting, to enable us to set some principles for excluding certain elements from the protocol?
I think we could. In fact, it's kind of got to be like, it's a standard that we tell the commission. We tell the commission that in order for assets to be divided up as a system asset, it has to predominantly benefit, it has to have material predominant benefits for Wyoming. And if they don't, why would they be a system asset? And I think that's kind of the point.
Senator Scott.
Could that then be the basis for a bill draft for consideration in October?
I think it could be.
Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with Representative Wiley, does that meet your desire?
Senator Scott, I second that. All right.
I think Mr. Kason's trying to jump in here.
Mr. Kason.
I hear he works for Rocky Mountain Power.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for more time usage. For clarity, for confusion, and maybe it's on my part. Earlier, I did offer, and I thought it was accepted, that there would be a multi-state protocol 101 education presentation by Rocky Mountain Power to learn about the mechanics, to learn about the allocations, to learn about the splitting up, the withdrawal, Wyoming standing on its own, or the Rocky Mountain Power states being one entity, and then the Pacific Power be the left coast being another. So my thought is, would a bill be a little bit more would it be premature, or we will not hold the Education 101 session? So you have an opportunity to learn what the multi-state protocol is, why it exists, the history behind it, and things of that nature.
I think we can do both. I think we can have the bill draft and and still have that 101 session and still have a conversation about the bill draft.
Perhaps have them on the same day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus a resolution. We might need an extra day. I'm telling you.
Mr. Chairman, I think there will have to be a request to Management Council for an extra day for this. This is a lot of work for. 2
Mr.
days.
Chairman, we might need another day in this session too.
Yeah.
We might need a special session.
All right. Anything else, committee? If not, let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll get to certificated service territories. Let's all bring it back. See if we can wrap this meeting up before tomorrow.
For a new tax code?
Are we live? We are live. We are back. And we are. Oh, we're at 11:15 a.m. All right. It's almost lunchtime. Certificated service territories of electric utilities. Actually, we do have a bill draft. A bill, actually, SF 105. Maybe we'll have LSO just introduce it to us really quickly and then we'll jump over here to the table.
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman. So just really quickly, Josh Anderson, LSO. So this was Senate File 105 from last session. It was an individual bill, although the last committee did consider this topic last interim, but most of this most of the members of this committee were not on that committee group. This bill deals with one utility providing service outside of their service area and in the service area of another utility. As you'll see, it adds a new subsection K on page 2 of the bill. It says no public utility shall provide service directly or indirectly to a customer in another public utility's certificated service territory, including by providing service to a point of delivery outside of the other utility's territory for consumption within that other utility's certificated territory, without a customer allocation agreement between the customer and both public utilities. Any violation of this section entitles the aggrieved utility to a civil action for damages for lost income, plus attorney fees and expenses in enforcing that civil action. That's the bill, Mr. Chairman. Take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for LSO? No? All right. We appreciate it. Thank you. Sean, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sean Taylor, Executive Director of the Wyoming Rural Electric Association, here on behalf of Wyoming's Rural Electric Cooperatives. I had some folks travel from across the state to talk about this bill and some experiences that we've had across the state. And I'd like to give them a majority of the time since they travel all this way. So I'm going to cut down my comments considerably, particularly after given the conversation that we've had with Senator Barlow that he'll discuss here in a little bit on how we might be able to get through this relatively quickly today and maybe address it at the next meeting in October.
Good.
So just to frame the issue, and first of all, I appreciate you all putting this on the agenda today. I know it was short-lived in the Senate this past session, but this is an issue that we wanted to bring up because we spent all day hearing about rate increases, right? And the astronomical rate increases that are going on. And the reason we brought this original bill, and we did it back in 2022 at an interim committee up in Hewlett. We willingly withdrew that bill so we could work with interested parties, brought it back again this past year. And again, like I said, it was short-lived in the Senate, but we wanted to bring it back again because to highlight the problem and what we see as the need for the bill. If a different utility, and we'll use an investor-owned utility in this case, is able to cherry pick and serve a load that is in a co-op certificated service territory, that impacts the rest of the members of that, the member owners of that co-op, and you would see rates go up. And so what we're asking for, and again, we'll get to Senator Barlow's thoughts here in a minute, because I think he has a pretty decent idea, but we want to protect these service territories. All right, but we don't want to stop development. And I know you all got a letter from PAW highlighting or talking about some of the concerns that they have. We don't want to stop development. Development's good for the state of Wyoming, whether it's oil and gas, subdivisions, coal, other minerals. We know that's good for the state of Wyoming, and it's also good for the utilities, again, whether you're a co-op or an investor-owned utility. And so, but we want to protect that. And short of an agreement, and we have these, we call them customer allocation agreements. We have these types of agreements all over the state. And some of these guys are going to talk about just that, those agreements that we have. And that keeps everybody whole. And we have done that. We have allowed a neighboring utility to serve a large load because we weren't able to. And we recognize that. But the agreements, and for the most part, come back and say, when we are able to serve that load, then we can take it back, if you will. But short of that, we felt the legislation was needed because if we don't reach an agreement, and there is a specific case that Mr. Wasserberger here will talk about here in a minute, but where the neighboring utility and the customer came to their own agreement and cut the co-op out, and they started providing service to that load that was in the co-op territory. So the broad view, I guess, is we want to protect the certificated service territories, but we don't want to stop development. So this initial bill 105 kind of drives everybody to reach those types of agreements that like I said, we've have all over the state. And there's agreements from co-op to co-op, between co-op and a municipal utility, between a co-op and an investor-owned utility. So it does happen. We are willing and we always want to serve, but we also realize the limitations we may have given our remote nature. But that shouldn't allow us to lose that load, right? It should allow us to come to some agreement so that load can move forward. The incumbent utility is protected, and the utility that serves that load at least enjoys the benefit up until the point where the incumbent utility can provide service. So I'm going to leave it at that because, like I said, these guys came from a ways away. They have pretty good stories to tell that show that we are willing to serve. We just don't say no. We are willing to serve, or willing to work with the interested parties to reach an agreement. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions or wait till the end when we get to a little more meat on the bone.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from everyone that you brought. So let's go to that next.
Yeah. Go ahead. Let's go down.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing us to be here today. I'm Andy Hewitt. I'm General Manager, CEO for Bridger Valley Electric Association in the southwest corner of Wyoming. We're one of the smaller co-ops in the state. We actually serve east of Evanston, north of Rock Springs in the Farson Eden area, Granger, Wyoming. We also have a little bit of territory that we serve over in Manila, Utah. And so we do serve in 2 states. I wanted to talk to you, and Sean explained customer allocation agreements pretty well. And I just wanted to talk to you about this bill and why I would ask for your consideration on this bill. Bridger Valley Electric historically has had customer allocation agreements with the neighboring utility, Rocky Mountain Power, and they have all worked out pretty well, although they've been pretty small, single consumers, small subdivision. So they've always been pretty easy customer allocation agreements. Here in March, Bridger Valley Electric System, just to kind of put this next deal in the context, I said we're small. We peak in the wintertime at about 25 megawatts. So we are a small co-op. In March, if you're familiar with Southwest Wyoming, you know there's a lot of trona and a lot of soda ash producers in mostly Sweetwater County. All of those producers are in Rocky Mountain Power's territory. They've been customers of Rocky Mountain Power since the late 40s up until now. In March, we had one of the producers has a deposit in our territory. They're looking to develop that deposit and put another processing facility. So they come to us and requested service anywhere from 100 to 120 megawatts. So You can imagine the look on my face. Historically, we grow at 1.5% a year. And so, we're going to go from 25 megawatts to providing service for 120 megawatt load. The issue, and it's not an issue, we are obligated to serve. Now, the neighboring utility, they have both utilities, Bridger Valley Electric in our territory and Rocky Mountain Power. There are significant transmission facilities that need built either from Rocky Mountain Power or from Bridger Valley Electric. 15 to 20 miles of 230 kV transmission line that would need to be built. And so that's a significant investment for that customer and for the utilities. So for Bridger Valley Electric to have that request and just say, that's way too big. For whatever reason, we just can't serve that. Go ahead and talk to the other neighboring utility, which we could do that. The problem becomes when that customer goes to the neighboring utility and they can't come to an agreement on those significant investments. Well, then they come back to us and say, you're obligated to serve. Well, how that would work out is anybody's guess. So we, with the customer, we went through the process starting in March. We had impact studies done on the system. We had cost estimates done. There were negotiations on the price, energy and demand. And we came to a point where we couldn't really agree. The customer, Representative Conrad and some others in the room could speak to it better than I could. We all know that soda ash is a commodity, so they're really sensitive to utility prices and other fuel prices and the like. So they need to be as competitive as they can, especially when there's 4 or 5 other producers in that area. And so it was becoming apparent not only because of those issues, it was becoming apparent because of some regulatory issues that Bridger Valley Electric would have to incur by, FERC regulations that we presently don't and whatnot. And so we have worked with, and we're putting the finishing touches on a customer allocation agreement. And the process has worked, I would say, fairly well. I think Rocky Mountain Power would say it's worked fairly well, and the customer, I think, is happy with the process. We haven't held up the project. We haven't stood in the way of that development. Bridger Valley Electric realizes the importance economically, not only to Southwest Wyoming and the communities there, but also to the state of Wyoming. And so, like I said, we're putting those finishing touches on that customer allocation agreement. It will be a beneficial agreement, not only for Bridger Valley Electric, but for the neighboring utility and the customer. So the process does work. And the question always is, well, if the process works, why do we need a bill? It was said in previous testimony back in the spring during the session when SF 105 was brought to the committee. There was testimony, a lot of different testimony from some different groups that, this is only about one case, a rare case. And I will agree, the case with Niobrara, I agree that was a rare case. And it was always, it's been said that this is just the co-ops trying to protect their territory, trying to preserve load. All of that. And that is true. That's important to Bridger Valley Electric as a co-op and to Niobrara. But that's not the only reason. There was a lot of testimony about who this protects. There is protection for the co-ops. There's also, co-ops aren't the only ones worried about certificated service territory. Investor owns are worried about it also because, you know, a co-op or a municipal could potentially serve into an investor-owned certificated service territory. So investor owns have concerns as well. I think what maybe is a little bit overlooked by some of the industrial users is the potential protection for them. In this case that I just explained to you about the soda ash producer, the soda ash producer come in, they requested, we went through the process. When we got to the point to where there was, you know, whether we was going to be able to do it competitively or not. When we got to that point, we could have said, you know, absolutely not. We're not going to let anybody else serve it. And at that point, you know, who knows what would have happened. I'm sure it would have went to the PSC and the like. But what could have happened is the producer could have said, okay, we still think economically we can make it work. We don't like it. We'll go ahead and go through the process and make an agreement for you to serve. And that could potentially happen. And so then what happens when producer B comes along, has a developable trona deposit within our certificated service territory, and they say, which was talked about with this producer, they talked about building their own private line. So producer B comes and they says, we're just going to build our own line. We're going to build out. We're going to be served by somebody else. And producer A is sitting there saying, wait a minute, we went by the rules, so to speak, the statute. Producer B comes in and doesn't. And now it's pretty hard for us to compete against each other. I think there is some protection that can be had there, not only for the utilities, but also for the industrial users. So with that, I'll keep my testimony short, and I would thank the committee and ask for your consideration on this Senate File 105. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is JD Wasserberger. I am Vice President of the Board of Directors of Niobrara Electric Association, located in Lusk, Wyoming. And if I seem a little nervous today, I am. I asked my brother Jeff to come down and present my testimony, but I don't see him here. So anyway, Niobrara Electric is also represented by Mr. Neil Werdeman and Andy Barnett, Mr. Andy Barnett in the back of the room. They are both directors also. I am also a third generation rancher and have owned and operated an oil field services company for over 40 years. Today, I'd like to present to you an agreement that was forged between Rocky Mountain Power, herein referred to as the company, and Niobrara Electric dated October 16th, 2016. An oil producer named the customer approached Niobrara Electric to supply power to an isolated location in Niobrara's certificated territory. After review, Niobrara estimated the cost to provide service to this site was approximately $2 million. This information is presented to you in section 1.5 of the customer service agreement. In section 5 of the application for approval of the agreement, it states, as described in the agreement, the parties have agreed, subject to commission approval, that Niobrara will permit the company to serve the subject property within the terms and conditions identified in the agreement. Because of this unique arrangement of customers' facilities on the subject property, the parties have evaluated a number of alternative solutions regarding service to the customer's facilities and have concluded that the arrangement contained in the agreement is the most cost-effective potential option for the customer. The agreement is attached hereto in confidential Exhibit A. It was great language. It recognized the financial realities of isolated needs of power consumers in our state. Simple, straightforward, common sense. In Article 2 on page 2 of the Customer Service Agreement, Section 2.1, it states, the parties agree that except as noted in this article, the agreement applies only to the customer load and required line extension to be served said load. Language is very clear that the only load served in this agreement is the isolated drilling pad. Section 2.2 states, the parties agree that as a result of this agreement, the certificated territories of Rocky Mountain Power and Niobrara shall remain unchanged. And that certificated territory is neither given up nor acquired by either utility as a result of this agreement. Section 2.3 states, in the event customer expands further into Niobrara service territory in either a contiguous or non-contiguous fashion, Niobrara retains legal and regulatory rights to serve the expanded load in its territory as afforded in its certificate of public convenience and necessity. And Rocky Mountain Power will not seek authority to serve in a permanent or temporary capacity the expanded load through dual certification or expansion of its certificate to serve without the consent of Niobrara and the approval of the commissioners. This agreement proves that Niobrara Electric was willing to work with another utility to ensure that the customer was provided electricity in their territory in a timely manner and as not to inhibit the ability to conduct business. Unfortunately, after signing the customer service agreement dated August 25th, 2016, the customer clearly violated the terms of this agreement. The customer built and largely expanded without the knowledge of Niobrara and the commission, the electric grid in Niobrara's certificated territory. Rocky Mountain Power was the supplier of this electricity. In a Form 10-K filing with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission on page 10, Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association Incorporated, the document states, in 1992, we, Tri-State, entered into an agreement expiring in December of 2025 with the Public Service of Colorado and Pacific Corp, two of the principal investor-owned utilities adjacent to our utility member service territories in Wyoming and Colorado, that provides, among other things, that each of PSCO, Pacific Corp, and us will respect all certificates of convenience and necessity and not attempt to serve any customers within another certified area. It seems disingenuous to me that Rocky Mountain did not know that their power was being consumed in Niobrara counties or Niobrara Electric's certificated territory, which would also be in violation of the customer service agreement, the application for approval of agreement with the PSC, and the Form 10-K filing. As owner of an oil field services company, the last thing I'd want to see happen would be to inhibit the ability of an oil and gas producer to do any business to develop their property. Also, as a former county commissioner, 70% of the assessed valuation of Niobrara County was derived from oil and gas. Believe me, I understood then how important the oil and gas industry was to the health and well-being of Niobrara County. When a new ambulance was needed for the oil and gas industry, along with the Union Pacific Railroad, stepped up to supply 95% of the purchase price of that ambulance. That's generosity. Senate File 105 does not prevent or restrict customers from receiving power from another utility in an incumbent utility's territory. It simply defines a process to which if a utility such as Rocky Mountain Power serves in another territory without permission obtained through an agreement approved by the utility, there are repercussions. Almost every cooperative in Wyoming has such agreements with other entities such as IOUs and municipalities to serve or let serve in their certificated territory. Co-ops want customers to be able to conduct business in a timely manner. However, without agreements or regulation, this situation can get out of hand and allow companies such as Rocky Mountain Power to cherry pick industrial loads vital to small co-ops, which may bankrupt said co-ops, a situation that would leave the small consumers in Wyoming in a dire situation. Small commercial and large commercial members in Niobrara Electric territory are vital to help keep rates low as possible. The loss of revenue provided by the commercial members would have a devastating effect on the retired and low-income members' monthly power bill who live in Manville or Van Tassel, Wyoming. Their needs and costs are important also. I can't express adequately the appreciation I have to be allowed here to speak today. Your service to the citizens of the great state of Wyoming is refreshing and amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wasserberger, and we will try not to hold it against you who your brother is, and appreciate your comments.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Quentin Rogers with Powder River Energy. I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Technical Services there. And I just wanted to relate or comment on the number of customer allocation agreements that I've been a part of over the last 15, 16 years of Powder River. We're a member-owned co-op in Northeast Wyoming, and we've entered into quite a few of these with other neighboring co-ops, as well as other IOUs, sometimes with services within our territory, or sometimes we're serving in others' territories. In my experience, it's been a pretty reasonable process, and seems like it works out the best for the members or the customers in general. One other thing I just wanted to comment on quickly was that I think going through the process of something like this customer allocation agreement is a sharing of information between the utilities. And that raises general awareness for everyone. So when our line crews are out responding to a major outage, we at least have the general awareness that there is another service in the area and maybe the nature of that service. And sometimes response times they're not trying to figure out what's going on when if they're not aware of something that's out there. The other thing where awareness is important is emergency services responses. Most of the counties and towns that we serve have good contact information with us, and we work well with them. If we're able to answer questions about other loads and lines and things of that in our area, if we're not serving them, I think just helps overall in those response times. So those are my comments. I thank you for allowing them.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Michael Lerwick, Director at High West Energy and serving President of WREA. So, Chairman, members of the committee, we thank you for your time today to hear our comments on Senate File 105. Certificated territories is an important piece. We all know that when the co-ops came to be 90 years ago, the IOUs weren't coming to the end of the line to serve individual Wyomingites. The lights came on with the development of the co-op. Since that time, High West Energy has grown very. We serve multiple industries at this point. It started as just a residential co-op, went around municipalities. Then the Air Force came in the 60s, put the missile bases out there. Three-phase power came through, which put the backbone of three-phase power that let the irrigation be developed in the southeast part of the state, and we farmers quit pumping water with diesel and moved to three-phase power, which was a big benefit. All the part of certificated territories that were protected. Since then, 2000, High West Energy was about a 40 megawatt co-op. The Niobrara play comes in. Last year with the Niobrara play, wind farms, and it seems interesting that a wind farm takes power, but when the wind doesn't blow, it does. It takes a lot of it. And so we went from a 45 megawatt peak co-op to 100. And now in the last year, our co-op has changed from 100 to adding 40 megawatts of crypto, which is probably about the most in the state. all these things are very positive for the state, and we understand that. Now, we have another 25 megawatts that are being asked for power for carbon injection wells. So lots of pieces that we talk about today, and lots of development, which is very beneficial, but certificated power territories in the end protect the constituents that are at the end of the line, that are the small places. We can't let this become the Wild West picking off big loads. And so to protect that, we in no means want to dampen any development, but people aren't trying to pick off the ranch that's 20 miles down the line that gets the same power cost as the person next to the substation. So I just want you to consider that and understand the need for the bill. And as we've heard from these very intelligent individuals, that we will work in good faith. We do have an obligation and a right to serve. And as JD said, I thank you as well for your service to the members of the great state of Wyoming. We're in good hands and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a couple of things with your leave that I wanted to outline, and then want to thank everyone for coming across the state, being with us. I had occasion to, since the session, where I really struggled with this bill. And so I reached out to both sides. I'm a member of a co-op, just for disclosure, and that was very helpful. Mr. Eisenbraun couldn't be here today with my co-op, but he was very helpful with a dialogue to help me kind of get there with this. All along, my concern was that we were going to have a situation where a project or a development, or, what if we don't have an agreement from our co-op, then it just stands that project down. And I've become convinced, appreciate all four of you bringing up the fact that there's a lot of work goes into these agreements. And I'm kind of taken at the word of the co-ops that's not going to end. So with all of that, I guess my question to any one of you would be, is there any concern at all that you're not going to be able to land on an agreement? And if that's the case, where do we go at that point? Does that make sense?
Anyone want it?
I'm the least qualified, but I'll try.
Okay, go for it.
I think you're in good hands, as we've heard today. The PSC regulates. We have an obligation, the right to serve.
Okay.
And so we have to come to an agreement. Now, there is in our world, I assume in the IOU as well as the co-op, there's determinate loads and there's indeterminate loads. And so in the agreement, you have to decide how long the load's going to last. And so with that contribution and aid, if we have to build 20 miles of line to a crypto facility needs 40 megawatts, we need that line paid for up front. If it's going to something that's a little more of a determinate load and it's going to be there for 25 years, then we can take it out. So the agreement is forced through the PSC, through our obligation to serve. Like, I think there's within the legislation, it has to come to the table. We can't be unreasonable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. Appreciate it.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we heard once again the example of something happened just north of here with the violation of Niobrara's area, I guess. I'm just wondering, we heard the beginning of the problem. I heard that, might have been some progress even recently in resolving that situation. I think since this seems to be the emphasis of the bill, I think we deserve an update. Has there been a agreement that Niobrara's reached with the customer and the invading utility according to the language in the current bill draft?
Mr. Wasserberger.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Boner, Senator Boner. Yes, there has been with the change of ownership that consumer sold to Continental. And Continent, even though it's it's almost like a wheeling fee, I guess I'd call it, but we're not realizing what we think we should have from that property. But Continental has been very transparent with us, and we thank them for that. It's been refreshing, quite frankly. But at any rate, there has been somewhat of a resolution. The problem with the previous owner, the customer, was their failure to recognize that they had to come forward with aid of construction from Niobrara Electric, and they never would recognize that. And we tried to calculate how much it was costing to bring it in from Rocky Mountain Power Source versus how much it was going to cost us to build into those facilities. It was pretty close to the same amount of money, we thought. But yet that customer chose to build to the east. This in turn, in my opinion, has affected the ability of Niobrara Electric. There's a lot of development going on out there right now, gas plants, everything. This has affected the ability of Niobrara because of this consumer and this customer not providing aid of construction years ago, has stalled us serving these other loads. And so it's hurt our co-op. And we are in discussion with 4 or 5 of those customers, possible customers. If that customer 6-8 years ago would have come forward with aid of construction, and we could now hook these customers into that infrastructure, the initial costs that this customer would have been, a lot of those costs would have been refunded. Everybody would have paid their portion. Every time a new member got hooked up, that new member would pay a certain part of that aid of construction first applied. So it's hurt that area. And it was all about aid of construction. That's all it was, in my opinion.
Follow up, Senator Boner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's having experience with the previous customer, I can agree they can be chaotic, and appreciate the current operator there. And, I think it comes down to, the situation, as far as I'm concerned, maybe I'm wrong, that kind of got this whole legislature involved. It does come down to sometimes the personalities involved, the organizations involved, and we do have to make sure that we're careful when we're making statute based off of, I think it seems like a rather extreme situation. And so looking forward, I think this is an important topic. Was a no on the bill before because it is so one-sided, and there is that concern about ability to serve areas that are isolated from an industrial perspective. And I know you probably disagree, but there's other folks who aren't in the room who probably disagree with that assessment. And that's why it took so long for everybody to come to an agreement. I'm glad to see that there is an agreement. But I think we do have to be careful when we start offering legislation based off of a very unfortunate circumstance, which has some degree of resolution now. But looking forward to continuing to work with you all. I do want to find a solution, and looks like one of my colleagues may be working on it. So but I think it's important that at the very least the committee understood that there has been some sort of agreement in that situation, which we didn't have at the last session.
Co-Chairman Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I really do appreciate everybody being here today. And I assume you're distribution only utilities, distribution transmission, you don't produce power. So you buy your power, and then so your power costs are kind of locked in a lot of ways. And so I'm trying to imagine what that customer, I can see that you're saying the line extensions from both sides cost about the same. It worked out that way. What about the ongoing costs of power based on rates that are set very differently in Rocky Mountain Power's territory versus rates that are set in your territory, different process and different considerations. So how much do you think the ongoing rates played into this? And or maybe you didn't think they did at all, but are the rates different on an ongoing basis between Rocky Mountain Power and your rates for industrial customers?
Mr. Wasserberger.
Mr. Chairman. It would be difficult for me to say that Niobrara Electric is in a lot of respects economical based on our customers that we have per mile. But that being said, our rates are pretty tough right now, pretty good. And when you add in a 30% cost increase by Rocky, the previous customer might be rethinking his thoughts about where he went with to get his power. I believe there's language in the PSC that rates are not to be considered. That correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm after the fact that Rocky Mountain is going to increase their rates by 30%. I don't know exactly where we're at right now.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, kind of look at here. The cost of building facilities to the plant were about the same from both sides, but the long-term cost of the customer at the time possibly were better in the Rocky Mountain Power territory. It was a better deal for the customer. And, you know, you may have been able to refix those rates to make it to match Rocky Mountain Power, but you may not have. You set your rates in a different way. You set your rates internally based on your board and who are elected members and have interests. But it's not exactly the same thing. And I think when we come here and we talk about the cost of attaching the customer to the system, that's one cost, but the ongoing costs are also important. And that's, you mentioned how important that oil and gas operation was to Niobrara County. It's important to the state of Wyoming too. We get severance, we get severance is the main thing, but so it's more than just that initial connection cost. And, you know, industrial customers, they're trying very hard to get more choices. And I predict in the next few years, they're going to get more choices. They'll be able to self-generate, have other people build them plants, partner with other people. And the Rocky Mountain Power rate case might push them over, but you know, I guess it's an empirical question whether Rocky Mountain Power's rates that come out of this rate case are going to be more expensive on an ongoing basis than what you would have, but I suspect they would be less expensive. And so when we come to this table and we talk about this, we've got this disagreement that they're trying to fix with statute. And I'm wondering if we're better off backing down. And kind of, there's going to be more market forces in this area that are unbelievable, and there will be changes. I don't know. I'd sure appreciate your comments on that. Apologize. I think the ongoing rates are very important.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, and I don't need to tell you the Senator case, but people aren't allowed to rate shop. We're a regulated state. So that's one problem that we have with that. If the costs were the same, you know, based on our Niobrara's calculations to hook up, the only reason they built if I understand correctly, they built 5.5 more miles of line to get into Rocky's territory, just for the better rate. And we're not a deregulated state, so I just wanted to make that clear.
And Mr. Chairman, we are not a deregulated state, but the economic facts are pretty big. They built more miles of line so they get cheaper rates. And so your boards have to pay attention to what options your customers might have. And if we close this loophole, then we're probably hurting those industrial customers and hurting economic activity in Wyoming. So, you know, it's kind of pushed up to the edge right now. We'd be better if we all just stood down, because if you force this issue, you might force more competition in the industry. And those people would say, those industrial customers might have a reason. Maybe with your actions as well as the actions of Rocky Mountain Power to say, we need more choices. We need competition. We need the ability to partner for self-generation. We need to have third-party generation at our facilities. We're closer to that than you even can imagine.
Oh, I can imagine.
You know, so it's very sensitive.
Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, I agree. We've been talking about that. There's the technical conference at the PSC on third-party generation coming up in October. We're very cognizant of that, and that's a much bigger. I think you would agree that's a much bigger pie to cut up the deregulation discussion or the competition discussion, and something that we're not going to figure out here. But I guess I would just go back to if we back off of this, what recourse do we have when another large industrial customer builds their own lines and hooks up to Rocky again? And that's kind of going back to I can't remember earlier question maybe. This is kind of a rare instance. I think it's Senator Boner that mentioned that. Kind of a rare example that we have with Niobrara, but if it can happen once, it can happen again. And that's why we have drafted this bill and brought it before you guys.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think a couple of the things that I've heard today that are occurring in my community, I mean, don't happen to be on the edge of a certificated area, but they certainly can happen anywhere, and including on the abutment of two certificators, is the CCUS. That is real, it is occurring. There are contracts, leases going on, et cetera, and the crypto. And there are multiple of those facilities in our community right now. In fact, I talked to Quentin just a couple hours ago about, how's that going, what's going on there. So I do think we are starting to see a dispersed industrial load, not just associated with oil field reserves, et cetera, that I think drives some of this. It will drive some of the third-party generation or on-site generation, but I also think it has the potential to have these cross-territorial things. So I'm going to offer a suggestion. As I listened to this bill in the session, I wanted some kind of resolution, and where this is placed in the statute, where this bill is placed in statute is 37.2.205. That's under public certificate of convenience and necessity. What this bill doesn't do is actually tie that, because what these utilities all operate under from the Public Service Commission is one of those certificates. So are those certificates meaningful or not? And what has been demonstrated by this case and by the fact that there are customer allocation agreements elsewhere and multiple elsewhere in the state is they do think they're valuable, but they can be breached. And so what I guess my suggestion is, I think we ought to use the mechanism that's already in place, and that is that certificate of public convenience and necessity to actually engage the Public Service Commission, which this bill draft does actually not do. This bill draft only gives the folks the ability to go to court, to have damages. And I actually think that's probably the last place they want to go with their resources to try to understand. So my suggestion is I've been thinking about this, I visited with these folks. I think there's a small work group, including Petroleum Association of Wyoming, because they have some reservations about this. And if Senator Landon is interested, and whoever wants to work with these folks to come up with an approach that takes the public service convenience and necessity route to this, so that there is an arbiter in the Public Service Commission to actually get to the fundamental issues, whether they be the build out costs, who builds it out, whether it's a customer or the one or the other utilities, or, and I don't know the rate issue, whether you can shop rates or not. But I mean, I think there is maybe a path forward, but let's use a mechanism that actually exists and I think is very important to the utilities, to all the utilities, public utilities. I will say one thing though, the way the current bill draft is, this includes gas, all public utilities. And I'm just going to throw it open to the committee. When we get to our if we okay, this working group kind of working on this issue, we may want to limit it just down to electricity. Because I don't know if we want to start getting into the broader sense of natural gas and other things. I just don't know that that makes sense because that's more of a urban type of thing. So I just throw that out there as a possibility we should consider, but I'm more than willing. I think there is a mechanism already in statute. This bill was not actually part of that. It was kind of a tag on, and I think there may be a better route forward. And I'll work with the interested parties, at least the ones that express interest, i.e. Petroleum Association and the co-ops, to try to come up with a draft this committee could consider. Yes, I added another potential draft to the next meeting, but it'll be short and very effective, I'm sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, sounds like we might have a path going forward. Let's see if there's any other public comment that we can take on this subject. Yep. Why don't you, let's move into public comment now. As the hour is drawing late. Thank you all. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. My name is Travis McNiven here on behalf of Basin Electric Power Cooperative. Basin currently serves over 167,000 end users, 11 member cooperative areas, $2 billion in total investment, 345 employees in Wyoming, and is obviously most noted for the Dry Fork and Laramie River coal power plants. Basin Electric and its members have a duty to serve 24/7, 365 days a year. And Basin works with its members to plan for and account for industrial loads. And Basin and its members make significant investments to serve load over the long term, and maintaining the integrity of the territories, the service territories, is critical to provide for long-term certainty of the planning process. This is true across the 9 states for which Basin is a power provider to rural electric cooperatives. Basin strongly supports the economic development and understands the importance of bringing new industrial consumers to Wyoming, and continue to work with the members to accommodate these loads. Maintaining the integrity of certificated service territories will continue to allow Basin Electric to maintain generation and transmission infrastructure that provides reliable and affordable power to our member owners in Wyoming. It is for these reasons that Basin supports the need for legislation such as 105, and certainly from what I can understand on previous discussions earlier today, what I will refer to at least for now as the Barlow language or movement for that further discussion. And so with that, I will end my testimony, Mr. Chairman, and take any questions if there are any.
Committee. All right. Thank you for your additional testimony. I appreciate that. Any other public comment? Public comment online? No, not seeing any. I will close public comment. Back to the committee. We have Senator Barlow, your proposal on the table to have a working group put together. Is there any opposition to that, Senator Case, or anything you'd like to add to it?
So I'm a little bit in the dark here. Wouldn't the PSC get involved automatically? Couldn't it go to the PSC now?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be through a complaint process, and this is actually be an active process. So it'd be an application type process instead of there's been a breach and we've got to fix it. This would be there's a need to have a breach of territory, and we're going to do it proactively instead of in the back door. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if it wasn't done, then there would be still the complaint process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And if there's this intermediate step where they have to go to the PSC first, as you might be suggesting, would they still have the option to go to court? Supposing they didn't like the PSC decision.
Mr. Chairman, I think if it's a contested case, I think what the chairman of the PSC said today, they always have the right to go to court.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That's true in those cases, but you're creating a new situation for the PSC, and I think you got to think it all the way through.
All right. Anything else? Wait, who said Mr. Chairman? Mr. Taylor.
Out there.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, when we were talking with Senator Barlow, I was texting with Mr. Chairman Pete or Commissioner Petrie on his way home, and they would be part of this working group as well.
I think that would be wise. Good.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Case.
I don't see any harm in letting the working group work. I just say, we may or may not take it up as a bill draft when they come back, but they'd have we could take it up as a bill to introduce, or they could introduce it themselves. It's all okay. It's not a bad path forward.
All right, let's see what they develop.
Yeah.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, just to formally state the fact that I would be willing to serve on that group. Like Senator Barlow, I'd like to see if we can't get to some resolution here on behalf of the co-ops, but also for the industrial users, the investor owns. If we can land in a sweet spot, I think that'd be great.
You're officially appointed.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, committee, anything else on this topic? Nope. All right, I think we do have a path forward. LSO. You were given a lot of directives today and yesterday. My main question is just, do you have any questions from us?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're in good shape. We'll get a
get
summary
together.
out to you guys as we put all this together, but yeah, I think we're good to go.
Senator Case.
There was one issue. We talked about making a level of the voter intimidation memo and looking at the statute. We talked about providing for a misdemeanor level of that. I don't know if we actually asked for that or not.
We didn't have that as one of our asks, Mr. Chairman, so if you want that, please let us know.
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
We were thinking that Senator Scott had that idea.
Yep. I remember we discussed it.
Okay.
Let's
So
go
that's
with
on
it.
the list too. Then I wonder if there's general public comment.
Oh, yeah.
They're all leaving.
Is there any general public comment? General public comment going once, going twice? No. Okay, then we are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good job.